and then we'll pop in suddenly. Looks like we might be live any second now. Hello,
I'm
this is
not actually
Benjamin Boyce.
following the. Did you tweet about this?
I did. Do you want to tweet about it? Do you need the
I'm
link?
gonna go retweet it.
Okay,
Oh, I should
retweet
go
it.
get an axe, like you said. They're right in
Well,
the other room.
we go grab an axe, and I'll introduce James Lindsay and
How am
Peter
I gonna
Boghossian.
possibly gonna retweet this though? If
You don't have a
is
cell
this
phone?
relevant? Or live in half an hour? Live now. Let me retweet this.
Yeah, okay,
Two
retweet
people
the
come.
retweet. And say with
Okay, I
Benjamin
got it.
Boyce and Peter Boghossian. Hey guys, this is Benjamin Boyce, Peter Boghossian, and James Lindsay. Peter Boghossian is indisposed right now, so he is not showing us his video, but his voice will pop in from time to time when the questions become
I'm an
salient to
apparition.
us. Yeah, he is. He's always wanted to do that, to shuffle off his corporeality. How are you
Do you
guys
really
doing?
want me to go get an axe? Is that like a thing we're doing?
I don't know. We can do that in the middle of Peter falling asleep during a question and answer period. But Peter, you want to tell us how you're doing?
I'm good. I just had knee surgery, and so I'm sorry for not being on video. My knee has to be above my chest, and so I'm laying down, and I'm on a ton of narcotics, and so I hope I hope that I'm coherent. We'll soon find out.
I kind of hope you're not coherent, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. Everybody's really looking forward to that.
Well, yes, as I told you, I fell asleep I was giving a lecture in South Africa, and the time zone is, boy, it's like it was like 2 a.m. and I was like passing out, and everybody was really mad. I felt really bad about it too. I thought I could handle it. I just couldn't stay awake.
James, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm trying to make this work. Hang on one second.
Okay.
That way, if there's a chat, I can see it.
Well, Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, you guys published a book. Was it in the autumn of last year or the summer, called "How to Have Impossible Conversations"? I think it was in June.
Correct.
Wasn't it?
2019.
In 2019, a practical guide. Yeah. So that's
Correct.
a while ago.
Correct.
Yeah, I was just talking about that.
How has that shaped
it's-
discourse
Go
since
ahead.
it's publishing?
That's a really good question. I've gotten a slew of emails, not only from people who've used How to Have Impossible Conversations, but from people who have had conversations with people who've used the book. So I feel really good about what we wrote, and it's really the distillation of my life's work to have conversations across divides. Jim's book with Helen, Cynical Theories, has done extraordinarily well, like truly well over 100,000 copies with no signs of slowing down. So we've been busy writing.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the? Could you distill the essence of How to Have Conversations? Like, what's it based on, or is there a kind of an etymology of the principles that you guys are building from?
Basically takes the Socratic method as a skeleton and then adds flesh to it, from cult exiting, cognitive neuroscience. Thanks, Jim. Every domain of thought, applied epistemology, you could think of, hostage negotiations. We took the best of the best from everything and added it to the skeleton of the Socratic method, so that people would have exactly what they needed for, and we layered it too. So, basic fundamentals, basics, intermediate, advanced, expert, master. So people could just jump in where they're comfortable. And I guess the cool thing with me, I gave the plumber a copy a little while ago, and he was telling me he used it on some difficult clients. So those sorts of things are always super rewarding to me when I hear that.
He unclogged their pipes. Oof. Yeah.
For
I'll be
the
here all night.
uneducated masses, what is the Socratic method? Is it the Kathy Newman method of just kind of drawing out your component or your proponent by just assuming that you know what they're thinking?
Yeah. So what you're really saying is, no, it is the opposite of that. It's comes from the Platonic dialogues, and Plato never wrote anything. Socrates never wrote anything. Plato wrote, and Socrates was a character in the dialogues. And he had these remarkable conversations. My children's book that I'm writing now is based upon the life of the young Socrates as he travels in a mythical ancient Greece. So it's basically a series of stages that you go through. You posing a question. Second stage would be, someone has a hypothesis, rejecting hypothesis, accepting it. it is, as I have argued repeatedly, if we encounter life on other worlds, it is how they would have to communicate. That would have to be the core of any communicative process. There is no, a lot of people running around today believe that knowledge can be revealed to them. And that comes in different sorts of flavors. But this is the opposite of a Kathy Newman approach. And it takes cutting edge research literature into account. It took us a long time to write that book, too.
And what was the impossible conversation that sparked that? Was it between you two, or was it one that you guys were having with somebody else?
I don't think Peter and I have ever had an impossible conversation.
Correct.
Actually.
I was hoping to correct that record in this live stream.
Well, might. It's unlikely,
true.
though.
I think the reasons for that, I got mad at him once, and it turned around to bite me. But
that'll teach you.
It will. I think when both people don't really give a shit about criticism and want to make the best possible work they can, that's an extraordinary gift. I've never found anybody who, my friend John Collicott, who is an editor at, I think, the Washington Post, told me one of the biggest things that prevents people from being a good writer is that they look at their work like they're babies, and they don't want any criticism of their work because it's like criticism of their children. I don't have that, and Jim doesn't have that, and we just want to make the best possible product. The only time I actually got mad at him was when, Jim, you want to tell the story?
Oh, great.
So, yeah, fine.
Spilling
so it was during the Grievance Studies affair. Is that the time you got mad at me? Is that what it was?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, okay. So it was during the Grievance Studies affair. It was, in fact, on New Year's for 2018. I celebrated my New Year's for 2017, I suppose, the end of the year, New Year's Eve, by getting drunk and writing an academic paper about feminist moon meetings and something about, spiritual sisterhood. And it was a poetry therapy based paper. What did they call it? Poetic analysis, poetic something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I wrote these like crazy bogus 6 poems using the random poem generator, and this absolutely just nuts, like first person monologue in between the poems from the perspective of a bitter divorced feminist. And I wrote this crazy paper, and it's like they're talking about, they're in their womb room and they're drinking like ceremonial menstrual blood that they made out of wine and motherwort and all this stuff. And it was all homemade. And they like were finding they go around and claim that they would find, things that were, very Georgia O'Keeffe shaped like vulvas, and then collect them in a vulva shrine. And then like they were passing the newest one around. It was made out of wood, and taking turns polishing.
And didn't you use the P word in that too?
What's that?
Didn't you use the P word in that too?
Oh yeah, I said I called it like polishing. It said something about caressing the pussy or something like that straight on there. I don't know if we can say that on YouTube. And so so I sent this thing to Peter, and I was like, I wrote the first draft. I was like, edit this, and he wrote me back and was like, I can't edit this. This is insane. My only edit is to take the P word out. And I was like, no way. And then he wrote me, he said, there is absolutely no chance that this will ever get in, that you have wasted my time. We're in the middle of a breakneck project with incredible workload, and you dare waste my time with this. Send it to Helen. And then he also said there was a 0 point, and then it was like 38 zeros, 1% chance of this getting accepted. And I was like, I don't know, man. And so I sent it to Helen, and Helen was also like, I fixed a couple of grammatical things, but I can't edit this. This is too insane. I can do absolutely nothing with this crazy paper. And you should take the P word out. And that was her only thing. And I was like, no way. This is legit. This is how they talk. So then I submitted that, and it got accepted. It was one of the 7 papers we ended up getting accepted. And it was like, I shot a hole in one on that one. And these two hosers didn't know. They don't know. This is why they were wrong about my Kanye West joke, too. They just don't get it.
Did the P word end up in the final draft?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, correct.
And it's talking about them rubbing it, right? They're like caressing it, and they're talking about the dew, and it's like really gross. It's hilarious. I really got into that. But it's really good because since Helen refused to edit it, it turned out that I disproved a feminist article of faith, which is that a man can't understand the perspective of, say, a bitter divorced feminist woman, because I wrote it from the first person perspective of such a thing and totally got it past the editors and the peer reviewers. Who must have thought I was a bitter divorced feminist woman who believed in feminist spirituality and brewing my own semi-alcoholic beverages and drinking ceremonial menstrual blood and for sisterhood, and aspiring to become a crone in the long haul of the years, being angry at our ex-husbands, the whole thing. Turns out, Pete was wrong, but he got really mad at me for wasting his time. At first, I thought he was joking. And I called him. He was like actually pissed off that I wasted his time.
Yeah, it was true. That's true. That's the only time I ever got mad at him, and it came right back to bite me.
So Peter,
0.000% wrong.
James, right again. Do you ever get tired of being so right, James?
You would have given me my Kanye joke, but you didn't give me my Kanye joke. Do you know the Kanye joke, Benjamin?
I thought it was pushing it.
So when the dog park paper got in, we had to write an author bio, which turned out to be our undoing in the whole project anyways. That stupid author bio. One word in that author bio hosed us. Nice. Instead of saying it was a PhD in gender studies, which would have given us cover, we said a PhD in feminist studies. And there are no such things like anywhere in the world. There are only like 4 universities in North America that have a PhD in that. So they were able to ferret us out. But at the very end, it's Helen Wilson lives with her wife or whatever, and her is human companion to 3 dogs, period. But I was like, no, comma, and the dogs' names are Judith Butler and Kanye. And they were like, that's way too far. And I was like, you don't know these people. Every one of them listens to Tupac. Every single one of them listens to Tupac. So, well, I don't know if they do now, but they did 20 years ago. It was like, I knew women's studies majors and hung out with some. They're all like secretly into Tupac. And I was like, no, Kanye is like on their list. But Kanye would have just put on the MAGA hat and said, I think for myself. And so it would have been totally awesome, perfect timing controversy had we named the dog Kanye, because all of a sudden, it's like this weird taboo thing and they don't know what to do with it. But no, it got nixed in committee. I'm still sore about it.
What qualifies you to critique the uncritiquable, to criticize the uncritical or uncriticizable? Because it seems like, from what I was speaking about with Peter just before we got on the call, critical theory, broadly speaking, as it has been applied in the academy, seeks to stifle all criticism and recast that as harassment. So before we get into that formulation, what qualifies you guys to criticize this thing that wants to be uncriticizable?
This radical thing called being a human. It turns out every human being is allowed to criticize whatever they want. And they've created a system of lies where that's not allowed. But being human, it qualifies us to be allowed to criticize something. Having actually spent time learning it. Like I saw a tweet today, somebody's like all like, yeah, but can anybody who criticizes critical race theory, could they actually write the argument from that position? And I'm like, I can. Want receipts? It's like we did the work, as they say. We learned the theories. So why shouldn't we be allowed to criticize something that we know well? We had 7 papers accepted at research level. Why shouldn't we be allowed to criticize something we proved that we know well?
Well, and Peter, why do you think that they, or what is up with them recasting criticism as harassment? And they're doing that specifically in Portland State University.
Did they just say that, by the way, Pete, in the new Vanguard article? Is that part of it that they accuse us of harassment?
No, that article is so mistaken about its facts. That's the other thing. It's always amazing to me how confident people are in their conclusions. And they don't even really look into the evidence they have. It's like the sharpshooter fallacy. They have their moral conclusions first, and then they look for evidence that their moral conclusions are true. No, but this is what happened with the faculty senate. They basically censored Bruce Gilley, who's done work and doing work on colonialism. It all started with the paper that he wrote, I think it was for Third World Quarterly, when he defended colonialism. And I've actually spoken to that. And just to be crystal clear, this is not about colonialism. This is about academic freedom. So what they did, the faculty senate and the union, actually, in a rare, and the administration, every single person was for this. The good thing about COVID is all these meetings were online. And so they posted their videos. And then they subsequently took down the videos. And basically, they were deeply concerned that people are criticizing critical race theory. I think people are trying to get those videos for a Freedom of Information Act. because PSU is a public university, and so that should be publicly accessible, unlike private schools. And so what they've done is they've said, in a move that's more Orwell than Orwell, they've said that they have the freedom, they have academic freedom in criticism of their quote unquote scholarship, although they didn't put it in quotation marks, constitutes harassment. So you can't even criticize. They've now officially institutionalized it, and you can't even criticize the deranged pronouncements of these folks coming out of you can't ask for evidence, you can't do anything, because if you do, you're harassing them and limiting their academic freedom. So this is the situation in which we find ourselves now.
They believe it's harassment because they've tied lived experience and the feeling of identity, which we actually talked about since we started with How to Have Impossible Conversations. We actually talk about that in How to Have Impossible Conversations, the identity level conversation. But they've tied lived experience and the subjective feeling of identity to their moral pronouncements, to their perspective, to their so-called scholarship. And so if you criticize it, you're not just criticizing ideas that have been put out into the world, say in writing or in speech. You're now criticizing the individual who produced them, because their standpoint is tied up with the information they put out. And they really do think this way. Like, Peter said that, authors are afraid that their ideas are like their babies, but these people actually treat their ideas as like literal extensions of their own identity. And that if you criticize somehow they just pick words kind of like, trauma, harm, safety, violence or harassment out of kind of a hat and just stick them on there and say that's what's going on. They also would argue to be a little more charitable. I kind of don't like to be charitable to them anymore, but you have to play it a little bit to be a little bit more charitable to what they say. They would say that if Peter, they were to publish some crazy thing and Peter criticized it, that this would then bring an army of online trolls to make fun of them and probably harass them. But I don't mean to be kind of callous to this, but this is the nature of social media. And if people paid any attention, unless you end up canceled, unless they actually succeed in getting your employer to do something stupid and fire you or to sanction you, getting an online mob after you almost is always, it's terribly annoying. And if you're not used to it, it's psychologically challenging, but it almost always ends up benefiting you. You can look at like Jesse Singal, for example, right now. The trans people are just making shit up about him big time. And it's just horrific, the stuff they're saying about him, to where even like I can set down my hatchet with him and say, look, this is ridiculous. But what's happening is, his Substack is on like exponential growth. As long as Substack doesn't cancel his channel, which is what they're agitating for, it's actually benefiting him. And so, for them to say that they don't want to have to hear bad opinions back or even people trolling them, I don't like that it's the fact of the world today, but it is the fact of the world today. It is the fact of social media today. I get harassed constantly, so I just don't want to deal with that rough and tumble aspect of it. And it turns out you don't actually have to be on social media. It
Correct.
is a choice. It's sort of a dumpster that people voluntarily climb into.
Yeah. The other thing that's fascinating to me about, you mean to tell me you are putting out knowledge claims? You're claiming to know things about the world, and those pronouncements that you're putting out inform public policy, and you're not allowing any criticism of those things. Okay, so let's take the same idea of that and turn it to civil engineering. More specifically, let's turn it to my favorite example of bridge building. So a bunch of people in the engineering department get together and they decide that they're going to start cranking out literature about balsa wood, building, ripping down the Golden Gate Bridge and building it with balsa wood.
That's literally a project we had in 7th grade, but I don't think you could drive those bridges.
Yeah, so why is it that certain areas of scholarship are exempt from critique, but others aren't? And why is it that people who are claiming to know things about the world and having that influence public policy, why did they get to exempt themselves from the best tools that we have to know it's true, which is the scientific method? And it doesn't just evaporate when it goes to issues of race, gender, or sexual orientation. And so there's something monstrous happening here. And Jim and I have spoken about this before. It's that the rules of engagement are different now. Mm-hmm. They have changed the rules of engagement.
And they've captured the playing field, basically, being the
Yeah.
academy. If all the faculty
Correct.
and the union decides that criticism is harm, and of course they don't mean all criticism, just criticism in a certain direction, then they control the entire institution.
Right.
Where does
Correct.
that leave us?
Once they get rid of me and they get rid of Gilly, they can just steamroll all this shit right in.
Yeah.
Right. Then nobody's going to be calling them out. And then I'm going to predict, and you, Benjamin, would know better than anyone about this, I'm going to predict the evergreening of Portland State, because it already lacks legitimacy, right? There's a legitimation crisis, or a legitimacy crisis, depending how you want to phrase it, in those institutions. And so where does it leave us? It leaves us that people, two things. One, a significant minority of people do not trust what comes out of the university. Two, it creates a kind of parallel social architecture in which some people, I'll give you one data point for this. Homeschooling has rocketed, and not because of COVID. The number of people who plan on homeschooling their kids. There are many reasons for this, but if you parse out the data, some of those reasons are, well, I had no idea what they were teaching my kids until I listened to it on Zoom, right? So there's a trust, there's a crisis of confidence. The other thing is it leaves us in a complete monoculture. And the thing that interests me more than that is that there's a monoculture in the colleges of education, right? They never hear the other side. They never. So they're producing teachers who go into the K through 12 school system. I think it was Jim who said to me, if you had a wand and you waved it and you got rid of, and you made all K through 12 schools non-woke, they'd be woke again within a matter of a year or two. And not because of, media they watch or what have you, but because the teachers who would then repopulate those districts are themselves woke. Yeah. So it's an engine it's a fungible engine of woke teachers that are created in our institutions.
Yeah. It's not only teaching, it's also public administration. And as I've been exploring, it's counseling. It's all the humanities are pumping out like woke counselors, woke therapists, which is actually, arguably very damaging to already, damaged people. So if we can't restock it, we're looking at, if we do the math, we're looking at least a decade of a professional class that is totally geared for this and is going to be renewed for quite some time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really bad. You start looking at like woke counselors and woke teachers right now, especially with woke teachers, like everybody who's been trained to be a teacher for at least the last decade or two is like, they've gone through an indoctrination program that they had to pass all the tests to get out of. And a lot of them, not everybody believes it. I hear from teachers all the time who are like, I'm right at the edge of like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to quit because I don't want to be, take the last vestige of sanity out of the school for the kids. It's like, I want to be an island of sanity, but it's like, we're all forced to regurgitate this stuff. Somebody just hit me on Twitter right before I jumped on here saying that they know, like because I'm saying right now that teachers who are pushing the activism and who won't put it down, and I can give you an example of what I mean in a second. I don't mean just everybody. I'm saying that they should be removed from their positions, union or no union be damned. They should be fired. They've violated the public trust in a tremendous way. And this guy replied, he's like, the asymmetry is just tremendous. And as I always keep saying now, the asymmetry is the story. He said that if I refuse, he was talking about himself, refused to teach woke talking points or woke beliefs, I could very quickly be removed. But now what we have is literally, this is around there are a couple of issues. One in Virginia that came up where some teachers and administrators, and it turns out a lawyer from the Open Society Foundation, which is a little strange to have thrown into that mix, started creating lists and doxing parents and harassing parents. They're putting them on lists. One guy got put on a list for saying, I don't understand, or for asking, why is it the case that Dr. Seuss is racist? That was enough to get him put on the list to be targeted and harassed. So people who are doing that are behaving way outside of acceptable means. But I'm not talking about firing people over their beliefs. That's firing people for their horrific actions. Then Governor DeSantis in Florida came out yesterday, I think, and announced that, he said not 1 red cent in Florida taxpayer money is going to pay for critical race theory in our schools. And then teachers are all over Twitter for the last 2 days, or last day and a half or whatever since, and they're like, he, like they really know what it is. We'll just do it subversively, or we'll just do it with a different name. We'll just keep doing it anyway. Well, you know what? At that point, you're actually violating a state order. You're in deliberate opposition to a state order. So bye, fired, gone. And until we start actually removing some of these people, because I don't care if my kid's teacher was the wokest person in the world on his or her own time, I don't care. But you don't get to bring it into the schools. If you're going to violate public trust by politicizing the schools, you're gone. And I'm convinced that it wouldn't take very many people, just like they're not allowed. You can have the most Christian woman or man in the world as a teacher, the most Fruit Loop fundamentalist in the universe. They can't preach Christianity in class. They have to keep it at home. They have to keep it separate. And I remember growing up here in the Southeast, this was a huge thing. There were people. I had a teacher who literally was doing the opposite, and it was like she was 430 years old, I think, and so they just let her retire out of the system. But it was like they were taking some serious legal risk keeping her on. They can't do that. So whatever their beliefs are, that's fine. But if they bring it into the classroom, they are violating the public trust. The parents, the public, and parents, this is our children we're talking about, depend on, and we trust our teachers and our school administrators, and thus, I guess, teacher unions, which is even worse. We have to trust them not to be doing this to our children and not to be doing this to our schools. If you're going to violate that trust, you violated the basically sacred covenant of your job, and you don't need to have a job anymore. You fire about 20 of them, and you start watching them shut up and not put it in the classroom anymore.
Peter,
it won't take that many.
Does this qualify as what you mean by going on the warpath against wokeness? And I want to clue people in because a few nights ago there was a conversation about wokeness, and Peter was brought on, and Pamela Perinsky, who's a psychologist, brilliant mind, brilliant writer. They kind of had two positions. One was to talk people through it, and Pamela's was a more personal approach and a more patient approach, a more compassionate approach. And Peter's like, no, it's too late now. We have to go on a warpath. So, and you, Peter, you weren't given the time to actually detail what you mean by that. And I'm wondering if James' idea qualifies as that, and what else qualifies as that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second, because it's important. I completely agree with Pamela. And that if that's the path that she wants to pursue, by all means, have those conversations. I wrote a whole book on it with Jim. You want not only is nothing stopping you, I'm actually encouraging you and giving you the tools to do so. And I hope she does do so, and I hope other people do so. And I think that's great. But for me, I have a different approach. I'm coming in with a trash can lid.
And a mop?
So
I have the mop, don't worry.
So you're familiar, Benjamin, with Jody Shaw videos, right?
Yeah, I've had her on.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. So I'm talking about changing the moral mind. I'm talking about how do we construct large-scale, macro-level ideological interventions into people's cognitive apparatus. Like, how do you change the moral mind? Well, you get people at multiple universities to release Jody Shaw videos. You go after the alumni who donate to the university. You go after major donors. Portland State University is going to have some pretty serious cuts, and I'm going to bet right now in public. And if you'd like to bet me money on this, I'm happy to give you odds. I'm going to bet that the president is not going to reduce his salary considerably. He might give a token 10% or something.
10%, 2%.
Yeah,
That's what
something
Bridges
like that.
did.
But
George Bridges.
Yeah, George Bridges, he's the paradigm for how not to lead, right?
Well, I thought it was Ted Wheeler, or was it?
Well, not to lead in an academics system. Ted Wheeler is the paragon of how to run a city into the ground, not how to lead. Mike Schmidt is the DA in Portland, but the point is, if you can't just take one approach to this, there has to be a systems level approach that includes lawfare. In other words, suing people over things. I could have easily sued for that Portland State Vanguard article that was defamatory based upon, it just said things that are untrue. But what's the point? I'm not just looking to, well, let me phrase it to you this way. I'm not interested in PSU not becoming woke. I'm interested in tearing down the educational system in every single English-speaking country in the world and leaving it in rubble.
Okay.
So Pete thinks that the educational system has rabies. This was a conversation that we had with Brett Weinstein a few years ago, and we were when the Grievance Studies affair was going to come out, and so we were discussing the woke problem in education and in higher education, mostly in particular, and we did whether or not the higher education system was sick was not a question. It's obvious that it was sick, and this was by late 2018. It was obvious that it's sick. Some disease is present. And so we're kind of putting on our white coats, and trying to become ideological physicians and looking at this. And so the question that we posed to ourselves was, does it have the flu? In which case, it's risky. It might get very sick. It might be risky to its long-term viability, but it'll probably have a fever and then recover. Does it have cancer? In which case, for the very simplistic model that we were talking about, we may have to have some very powerful interventions. We may lose the patient, if you will, but we through surgery and something like chemotherapy might be able to push the disease out of higher education. And then the third option was, or is it rabies? And how Brett is, and Brett's very good at putting things in a very kind of tangible way. Yeah. And so he said, what you have to understand is that when your dog has rabies, it ain't your dog anymore. And you have to shoot the dog with rabies because it ain't your dog anymore. And it's a hazard to everything, every person and itself and every other animal. And it can infect other animals. And so the question was, how do we figure out, and we were talking about the Grievance Studies affair before it was even released to the public as a partial diagnostic. How do we figure out whether the university has the flu, something like the flu, cancer, or rabies? And Pete has now been convinced that it has rabies, and he's offering that solution. I'm still not quite sure whether or not it's cancer. I want to fire some intentionally subversive teachers and see if that starts changing course real fast.
So, James, how you're describing your tactic is a further test to gauge if it can.
Well, it would be a further test. I mean, everything turns out to provide data back. But we dropped the Grievance Studies affair, and Pete famously said on video, if this doesn't change anything, it would scare me. And it didn't change anything. Well, actually, it did. The universities accelerated their descent into madness. They pretended that we didn't reveal any problem whatsoever and just kind of not only kept doing it, but put in, institutional mechanisms to protect themselves, to punish Peter. They're still writing about it. They wrote about it yesterday in the Portland Vanguard, as a matter of fact, to say that we were, way off the rails and that we were inappropriate and that we were just basically awful trolls. And so it's
great that they keep on keeping you relevant. Your critics do.
We live rent free in their head all the way. It's fantastic. But the thing is, this would be another test, right? So if we go in and we take very specifically, and I mean very specifically, teachers who said, we're not supposed to teach critical race theory, but we're going to do it subversively anyway. We're going to defy the order. And we're like, okay, you don't have a job anymore. We take a couple dozen of those and show that this is how we'll respond to that attitude. See if it continues. See if they just keep going with the subversive nonsense. That's like going in and doing a surgery and removing the tumor. Now, it could be that it is cancer and metastatic, at which point, that's not going to save anything anyway. Yeah. But it would be a very interesting test. I mean, we just saw the example where the teen Vogue writer actually did end up, even though she's black, did end up getting canceled from her position for those old anti-Asian tweets. And I'm terrible with names that I don't already know, so I would have to look up her. And pop culture is not my jam, but somebody will put it in the chat in a second, so then I'll know what it is. But yeah, she actually got fired. So maybe critical race theory is a cancer, and the medicine is starting to take. People understand what it is, and they're like, the immune system might be waking up. And I think with the schools where you have people doing stuff like doxing people, putting them on lists for harassment, that's not okay. And then people saying that I will defy the governor's order to do whatever I want in the schools, that's also not okay. And so it's like, okay, let's just pop a couple of those people right out of their jobs and see if it keeps going, see what happens. Let's do that.
Yeah, I also want to stress in that the changing the moral mind and shooting those changes at the origination point of madness. At any point, if those universities or if the administrators or faculty say, you know what, we were just subject to, we got carried away with ourselves, we were wrong, we made a mistake, we're going to get back to doing what we should do, is educating people, I think that's fantastic. So this isn't any kind of retribution. This is just a sickness, and I do think it's rabies. A deep sickness, a rot has come to take over our engines of knowledge production, and they can no longer be relied upon because they're causing the legitimacy crisis in this country. They're undermining our global and economic competitiveness. They're teaching a divisive, dangerous, hurtful ideology to people, to kids. I mean, there's literally nothing good that's come about, and they're not even solving the very thing that they want to be solving in the first place. So
they don't want to solve it. Right.
So at any point, like, it doesn't even have to be explicitly, the Chicago principles. But unless we change the moral mind, unless we shift the Overton window back, then this is it. These are the enemies of Western civilization. I mean, this is not hyperbole.
Okay, so what I've seen is that I think we need to be careful and make some distinctions here, or at least flesh this out. When you guys talk about, or when it's spoken about dismantling this huge system and kind of going on the warpath and adopting that language, it's aimed at the institutions. So
it's systems level.
It's systems level. What I seen in one analysis of the Evergreen State College protest is that a bunch of young people who were not able of abstraction, or certain conditions loosened the ability to act on a abstract level, were taken away, and they took all that systemic language, that structural language, and applied it interpersonally. And so when there are calls to operate at a very urgent level and a very thorough level of eradicating a system, that can lead people who are not capable of thinking at that level into, going out in the streets and saying we have to brawl this out. So how do we make that distinction between when you're in callous mode or in warpath mode, where you're aiming that, and when to switch that to something more interpersonal?
Jim, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take that?
I mean, it's really more a question for you, because I want people who engage in illegal activity to be removed from their jobs. That's straight insubordination, to be removed from their jobs, and see what correction that produces, to level the cancel culture playing field a little bit, to be honest with you. So I don't actually want to see our educational institutions leveled to rubble. And I don't want to see I want to see higher education actually put into a position where it has to compete with something that forces it to compete based on merit and outcome again, rather than virtue signaling, token points that don't mean anything in reality.
I think, let me pause you, Jim. I want that too. We all want that.
But I mean, I don't want to level them to the... I would love to see, however, like you said, talking to the alumni and getting the alumni to withhold donations from the institutions, absolutely, until they give this up. I've advocated for that as well. Now, just to talk generally to Benjamin's question, though, how do you apply this difference? Is that, brawling in the street isn't actually going to solve a systems level change problem unless we've crossed every possible barrier. Civil society, like it or not, wherever this might be going, has not yet broken down. And we do not have, no one has, just like the general principle in liberal societies, a general principle in liberal societies is that nobody has the right to do violence first. People have the right to defend themselves, but nobody has the right to do violence first. So switching that, systems level thing to let's go interpersonal with it. Let's start going after individuals. That has to be, just the description of that has to be the bright line. Like, this isn't what we're doing. We're trying to target the system. We want the system to either change or to feel actual pain because it won't change and it's posing a threat to everybody and everything. So it's like, I do get it, though, that when people get hooked up in this becomes very dangerous rhetoric, and you have to be very cautious, encouraging people to take the system and bring it down to rubble, because some idiot will, meaningfully.
Yeah, to be crystal clear about that, I'm not talking about, obviously, any kind of physical activity against a system. I'm talking about lawfare, for example, which I mentioned. So we need to start suing people who exhibit instances of neo-racism. We need to start,
there's that term,
naming and shaming, like the Southern Poverty Law Center. We need to start doing that. That's what I mean by ideological warfare at the systems level. Okay. I mean going after institutions that are promoting this at the institutional level.
Which is mostly going to be via like lawfare or money, or by creating public pressure campaigns to demand that somebody who's outside of what we would generally consider the rules of engagement, if you will, we're calling for doxing, harassing, hacking, absolute violations of or defiance of state orders, to say that those people, okay, fine, if that's what you want to do, then you no longer have a job, and that's fine.
Public pressure campaigns sounds like the expanded. It's kids in cages turned into what those expanded detention centers. It's just cancel culture by a more humane name.
Yeah. So I would tell you that if someone's coming to cancel you, you should cancel them first. Like if you don't understand that that's the world that we live in right now, but you have to do so with a mindset that. So I put this on Twitter just a bit ago. Live by the sword, die by the sword. And here's the deal. We're ready to put the sword down as soon as you do. We didn't pick the sword up first. We didn't come out of the gate canceling people. We've been resisting and denouncing cancel culture for a long time. We're also, Peter and I would not call for like the wanton or almost random. Neither of us would call for let's go dig through somebody's tweets 10 years ago and make them lose their job. What we're instead calling for is somebody is in direct. The asymmetry is so profound that we have people getting put on harassment and doxing lists and having their careers threatened for asking the question, saying, I don't understand why Dr. Seuss is racist. And then on the other side of the coin, what we have is people saying, no, you can't fire people who are they're doing illegal activity in direct defiance of state orders in order to maintain their ideological push. Like this asymmetry is so profound. This is just restoring the asymmetry, but doing so in a principled way where it's like, no, you actually violated the rules. So you're out.
So that's why this is so important that I keep advocating. And again, my solution and Pamela's solution not only are not incompatible, but they're perfectly compatible. We have to start suing, or that's what I mean by an ideological frame. Like you have to start suing people. You should, there's, how the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, Greg Lukianoff's organization, comes out with a list of free speech, the worst offenders. Yeah. We need to create that, right? And then those institutions need to be targeted. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. It's like I've called for with alumni associations, or if you're just alumni in general, or your university is not the university you graduated from anymore. Whether it has rabies or not is another question, sure, but it is not the institution you knew and loved 20 years ago. So I would tell you that, like, I disagree with the idea, like, I went to a university, like, that me making a statement, I will never give to that university again. Too much. But I'm not going to give to you again until your president comes out and makes a clear statement of principle saying we're no longer doing this anymore. And then there's tangible evidence showing it. Like, what the side that Peter and I represent, and you, Benjamin, of course, and most of the people listening to this would represent, is a side that wants sanity back. But we're willing to stand up now and say, listen, we're going to play hardball with you because we've tried conversation for a decade.
Repeatedly, over.
They're not interested in conversation.
No, and now they're calling conversation harassment. So, like, what else are you gonna do?
Not even conversation. Like, just criticism of their bad ideas, and it's like that's harassment now. And it's like, holy crap.
So what you're gonna do? I'll answer that question for you. That's why you need systems level attack on the ideology which has parasitized itself to the universities. Right. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not. And I think that that's very, very clear. I've been hesitant up until now to engage any form of lawsuit because I always was Pollyanna and thought, geez, maybe they're going to come to their senses. Maybe they're going to change. No, there is no maybe anymore. The time for talking is over. Now it's lawfare. It's naming and shaming. It's going after alumni and telling them not to donate. It's exposing things. And some people have, there's a whole people think I did it. I did not do it. Woke at PSU, woke at these things, all these Instagram pages that have come up. We need to start exposing this for what it is, and we can't just be good little boys and girls who let the neo-racists ram through any deranged idea they want and expect everybody is going to shut up and comply.
Yeah, and here's why, just so everybody can understand what we're actually dealing with. This isn't some like, oh, it's communism or whatever. Whatever you want to say about what the woke ideology is, and we can talk about that. I know I can for hours. The truth is, with lots of receipts, the truth is that it is an ideology, and people are finally waking up to this, that it only thinks in terms of power. I hate to do this. I know it's all like Star Wars themed Wokedom, Menace, and the lightsabers, but I'm going to switch fictions, not into my favorite one, but into the worst one that you're not supposed to do anymore. It's time for a Harry Potter illusion.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go the Dr. Seuss route, but
no, we're not allowed to do that anymore. Remember, he's a racist. I was in the same fraternity as Dr. Seuss.
Oh wow! What was the bashing ceremony to induct you in?
Well, as it was fitting, of course they would chop us with a sword, right? That's obviously what had to happen. You can see the scar still on my neck.
Yeah,
no,
amazed by it.
This is just being silly. So the truth is that what this ideology is an ideology that only cares about power. It is a power-obsessed ideology. So the metaphor is, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I explained to her, I said, it's good versus evil in a very particular way. The analogy of Harry Potter is that Harry Potter is obviously the good side, and Voldemort is the bad side. But is Voldemort, granted he's a dark wizard, but does he say that he's evil? Of course he doesn't say that he's evil. What does he say? There is no right and wrong, or there is no good and bad. There's only power and those too weak to seek it. And that is, their mentality is the Voldemort mentality. Mm-hmm. Their mentality is that it's all down to power. And that, I just even read on Herbert Marcuse's essay on liberation. He has this long section about, well, not too long, a couple of paragraphs at least near the end, where he's explaining why ends do justify the means for revolutionary movements. We talked about repressive tolerance before. Mm-hmm. Well, in his essay on liberation, which he wrote in 1969, 4 years later, he's literally making the case for ends justifying the means when you're on the left. This is a power-obsessed movement that believes that ends justify the means. So, of course, they're on the right side of history. So if they have to dox, harass, cancel people, and later that will accelerate. Those are symbolic actions that represent their excommunication, but they represent killing. They kill somebody, but in a non-physical way at the moment. That can accelerate very quickly. This is the side that they're on. It's all power. So if they are an ideology that only understands and responds to power, the only possible option is to respond with power. And
correct.
The ideal is that you are, I hate to use like white knighting or whatever, but you have to be like the virtuous knight that's going to use strength. They're like chickens with their heads cut off. They're like, they lose it because you've hit them where it works, which is power. Universities, although the moral strength of this is strong enough to get people to ignore the financial aspect of things in many cases, they're still beholden to money. The university will collapse if all of a sudden its donation and tuition income streams start drying up significantly. And so that's a form of power that is pressuring them in a totally legal, totally reasonable way. And I think that the carrot stick here works really, really great. The carrot should be, as soon as you get yourself straight, we're ready to give you donations again. You fall off the wagon again and it's gone.
Yeah, and it's all with the traditional rules of engagement. It's going through the courts. That's how we settle disputes. Yeah. We're not ripping statues down in the streets. We're doing this with lawfare. We're doing this in a civilized way, and we're going to use the mechanisms at our disposal to adjudicate the claims of the neo-racists.
Okay,
and so people have to not be afraid to be a Jody Shaw. We need you know what? What do you think happens at Smith with Jody Shaw? Instead of Smith saying, "Oh shit, we've really gone too far," no, they double down. It's evergreen. They double down. There's always the doubling down. There's never like, "Wow, we should really reflect on this and talk about this and think about this." Yeah, but you were going to say, Benjamin, you were going to say something.
So James, you brought this up by evoking the word principle, and Peter, you've brought this up by evoking the phrase moral mind. So it's really fascinating. We can spend hours and hours discussing wokeness. We can spend a lot of time talking about their tactics and then our counter tactics. But what are we putting in its place? This might be the most boring thing to talk about, but what is the moral mind?
No,
what are we going for? What is that made out of?
It's the most important thing to talk about, because whereas they have Chaz, we have universal liberalism. And I'd like to invite Jim to speak to the last two chapters of Cynical Theories. That's the solution. You want to know the solution? What do we offer? Read the last two chapters of Cynical Theories by Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay.
I have that one. I can hold
Is it
up
a city
to.
on the hill?
I do recommend, exactly. It is sort of, though. I mean, not to be like ridiculous, but the truth is that the principles in that are behind universal liberalism, obviously there are some gaps, but the principles are actually legitimate. They work. Seeing people as individuals works. So stereotype accuracy, let me just dive into this for a second. Stereotype accuracy turns out to be real. It's the most confirmed. There's a replication crisis in social psychology and psychology generally. Not on stereotype accuracy. It's the most replicated result.
It's the one that they don't want. Like, no.
Yeah, right. And so what does stereotype accuracy tell you? It turns out not much. And if you actually go read the actual literature about stereotype accuracy, you learn it doesn't tell you much. Mm-hmm. It says that the general impressions that people have are in some sense descriptive of a cultural group, which may or may not be racial. A cultural group might be, this fandom around a sports team. Like, people know what Alabama fans are like. People know what Chicago Bulls fans are like. People have stereotypes about those people, and it turns out the accuracy is describing like the big statistical behavior turns out to be really high. But if you actually read the literature, it's like 2 or 5%. It's extremely low. The probability that any given stereotype will apply to any given individual within that population. So what does this tell you? That even if stereotypes are in some regard something accurate, it's nonsensical to apply them to any individual. It's nonsensical to be prejudiced. It
works on the level of an ethnic joke or something. Those things are funny because they kind of ring true, even if they don't actually describe any given Irishman or Polish person, right?
That's right. And this is where,
kind of
Helen and I talked about this a lot back in the day, and we actually have an argument for it in an essay that we wrote, that ones that ethnic type jokes that are given in good humor are actually, as long as you can give as good as you can, or you can take as good as you can give, and that they are intentionally in good humor, not disparaging intentionally, they're actually kind of a bonding thing, and they help you get over and navigate those sticky issues around cultural friction. And so, this absolute weird moratorium around it that just expanded and expanded and expanded to where now not only can you not have jokes, but you're not allowed to have friends of, other cultures, or really what they mean is identity groups. Because if I had a black friend and say, well, I talked to my black friend, they're like, that's racist that you would invoke that. So this is such a terrible way to think. But inside classical liberalism, we have this idea, no, prejudices maybe just come from a place where there's accuracy behind them, but it's nonsensical and unethical to apply them. So we shouldn't. We should assume nothing about an individual. We might be talking to one of the 95% or 98% of the population that completely defies those stereotypes, or that to whom they don't apply, or only a few of them apply, or they apply very weakly, or something like this. So it makes absolutely no sense to be prejudiced whatsoever. This isn't, how do you get there? You think in terms of individuals. You don't think in terms of population groups. I know that sounds like boring and passé because we did that for a couple centuries, or at least a few decades. We got to where we're doing okay with it, or better with it. It sounds passé, but the truth is.
But that's the thing. You finish. Sorry.
No, woke is. I was just going to say that woke is snake oil. Woke invented a disease, systemic racism, that isn't there, so it can sell the cure. It's snake oil,
which makes more of it.
Well, isn't that convenient, right? It's like it's like, look at like Munchausen's by proxy, right? So you know what Munchausen's by proxy is, correct? It's a psychological disorder where it's almost like a form of narcissism where you gain, like you crave pity, right? you're trying to win pity points for yourself. Your self-esteem is built up based on gathering pity, and the way that you get it is by showing like what a good carer you are or how much suffering you have by having to care for somebody else who maybe you're poisoning so that they stay sick, and you can say, poor me, my daughter's so sick. Well, meanwhile, you're like dripping her a little bit of arsenic with breakfast every morning. And you know, we've heard stories like these kinds of things, right? Or you're doing something to limit or hurt or harm, and then playing the pity card. Oh, woe is me, look how hard my life is. My daughter has this weird disease nobody knows about, and it's actually you feeding them a little bit of bleach with their cornflakes. And so so that you can get the pity points. And this is a psychological disorder known as Munchausen's by proxy. It's the same kind of mentality, right? So you have a society, it doesn't really you want to be able to extract the victimhood points out of it. You point to a disease that's like, you know, there are reasons to believe that there's something to it, but it's like kind of like looking through a funhouse glass. It's not like real. Mm-hmm. And then if that creates more of the same problem, look how much more victimhood there is. You know, if that one of the perverse things about critical race theory, for example, is that it predicts that there's hidden racism in everybody and that eventually they will unmask it. Well, if they just piss everybody off and make them racist, they're going to misinterpret that and say, see, they were racist all along. Can't possibly, they have no mechanism to understand that they're actually making society sicker by feeding them snake oil to cure a disease that did exist in the past that no longer exists now.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into it, but what we saw yesterday to the reaction of the tragic event that I don't want to really get into because of YouTube rules, but there was a tragic event, and the media came out with a reason why, and they said it's white supremacy, even though that's not what happened on the ground. We don't know that, but it's making...
Did you see the meme that I shared earlier?
What was your meme?
It's like this little car, right? And it's like some people trying to shove like a giant queen size mattress in the back seat of like a little car. And then it's like, you know, the media is the people is what the words are. And it's like any bad event is the car, and it's white supremacy is the mattress, like trying to shove it in. And that's the story right now. It doesn't matter what the tragic event is. It's white supremacy for sure.
And there's no way that can be good for us. That increases societal friction. It increases, it really erodes the possibility of a liberal order.
Observe that it also creates a racial scapegoat, which is 1933 logic. A racial scapegoat that's believed to be privileged and hoarding resources is 1933 logic. It is reproducing the anti-Semitism, but in a broader and different scale of 1933, which didn't work out well. It's not a road. I mean, if we learned one lesson in the 20th century, it should be that that's a road we don't want to go down.
Peter, do you have something to add?
Are you in an aquarium, Pete?
Yeah, there's some audio.
Did you go scuba diving?
Is it stopped now?
Oh, there you go.
I didn't know what that was. Sorry.
Did you fall asleep in the middle of your talk?
Sounded like a soccer game.
No, but I am on a ton of narcotics.
Yes.
Legal for my knee surgery. I'm sure someone will clip that and be like, add this to the list of Boghossian's personal.
How many lights do you see, Peter?
Four.
Here's a follow-up question or a subsequent question. Are liberals born or made? What is the condition to develop liberals? Because this is an ideology that seems to resist a lot of natural tendencies we have, or at least limit or dampen them. So if our education system is given over to illiberalism or cuts the knees out of liberalism, presumably liberals will cease to exist. Or is it a natural thing? What's the components of it? How do you be that? How do you develop that in your fellow man and in your children and in your society at large?
I think the answer is both, actually. If you've read books like Thinking Fast and Slow or Moral Tribes, you kind of really get the impression that human beings have two modes of thinking that they dive into very naturally. Mm-hmm. One is the fast, intuitive thinking, and that one's probably largely illiberal. And then there's the slow, more rational one, and that's where liberalism grew out of the Enlightenment, which focuses on Enlightenment rationalism and using reason to the maximum degree possible that humans can apply it. In fact, I've heard that liberalism was created largely as a philosophy, as an answer to the fact that humans are very often not reasonable, and is to try to encourage those best instincts, if you will. but it is something that has to be trained. On the other hand, though, you see the experiments like the the compliance experiment, where I forgot the name of it, where they bring a bunch of people in and they draw some lines on the board, and like everybody is a Confederate and gives the wrong answer, like which line is the longest, and people give the obviously wrong answer, and like 1 out of 4 people are like, no, it's that one, but everybody else just kind of goes along with the crowd. The people who are going along with the crowd have, that's probably largely genetic, right? Not entirely, but probably.
So
very
you would have to
genetic.
change for a certain portion of the population that's following whatever is the ruling paradigm of the day. You would have to actually change the paradigm in order to change them. And then there's certain people
What you would have to do is to train them to realize that there are these pitfalls. We used to train people in realizing that there are cognitive biases that are pitfalls. We used to train people. We naturally think in terms of our own group or tribe. We had to train people to think in what anti-racism should look like, or anti-bigotry should look like, is training people to think, like I was just speaking about. Yeah, maybe there are stereotypes, but it makes no sense to be prejudiced, right? And training people to when they have that first reaction, to slow down, think about it, and act differently is something that is trainable. And I'm not saying like it's some weird re-education way. I think that it was something that was very successful. People do not naturally incline toward that, except in rare cases. There seems to be certain personality types that are resistant to that. A lot of people talk about, and there's a book, I forgot what it's about, but the like God-shaped hole in the brain or something, God-shaped something in the brain. Yeah. And it talks about how people are naturally inclined to theological thinking. But it also posits that, and it's very persuasive, but it also posits that some percentage of the population, who almost all identify as atheists, seem not to need it. Yeah. Like the so-called God-shaped hole in the heart that they talk about in Christian circles very often actually isn't there for some people. And those people are going to have naturally secular instincts in many cases. And so there's that aspect where it's both, right? There are people who are going to be naturally more inclined to this for whatever set of reasons. And then there are people who certainly are able to learn more of it than they would otherwise. But anything that gives them the capacity to be rewarded by indulging on that tribal instinct level, illiberal approach, like control every problem just by stamping it out and killing the people who don't go, who are creating it. You give people a reason to indulge that, and it's a problem that can spiral out of control really quickly. So it's both, but you do have to teach people. Most people have to learn quite a lot, and even the people who are predisposed to liberalism still have these instincts to act all of a sudden like tribally. And,
that's probably how most of them get sucked into it. Even the anti-woke stuff needs to be resisted insofar as it becomes a tribal thing.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge thing. That is a very huge thing.
Peter, I'm going to...
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, can I ask you...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, how have
Anything you want.
Yeah, how have you inculcated liberalism in your students, being a professor?
It depends what you mean by liberalism, but before you answer that, I want to piggyback off of what Jim... I think at an individual level, to answer your question, we need to create a culture in which it's not only okay, but good to say, I don't know. And we don't have that culture right now. And it's okay to not know the answers to moral questions and to be able to think about them and engage them. And the vehicle for that, in my opinion, is not just confirmation, but it's, in our book, we call it a disconfirmation question. That's why it's so important to create strong institutions. And that's why it's so important that the North Star of those institutions is fairness. And we know what that looks like. We know that when systems are unfair, it's far more likely, Rawls talks about this, not only are you far more likely to see a rebellion in those systems, particularly among the people who feel they're not being treated fairly, but the whole system itself is compromised and it doesn't function as efficiently. And there's some really strong lines of literature about that. But I think that this is not a one-shop problem. Like, this is not a one solution. We need a multiple tiered and layered system that systematically targets what you asked me about before, the moral mind. Right. So when I go into an ethics class, I have my own opinions. Obviously, I've thought about this stuff for well over a quarter of a century, But I don't go in with, pushing the opinions down people's throats. That's not what happens in many institutions with many teachers, particularly if they teach something with the word studies in it. They go in knowing, quote unquote, or they believe that they know, they think that they know the solutions. They test people on those solutions and they get the answers back. So they look at the university as an ideology mill.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the problem with liberalism then. If you're supposed to have an open mind, aren't you trying to, you're coming in with the assumption that the open mind is the correct way to go?
Well, what's the alternative to an open mind?
One that has group power, that centers power and agreement, and then turns itself into a fist to enact the will of fairness.
That's epistemologically bankrupt, because you would never know that the thing for which you advocated, which is the thing for which you should advocate. So your epistemology must always precede everything. And the only way you can do that, Mill has written about this extensively, is to genuinely understand the other sides of a position. And we don't teach people the other sides of a position. It's a monoculture.
That's harassment to know the other side.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is why I actually disagree with Peter that the key object of institutions has to be fairness, and I think that it actually has to be truth. It has to be fealty to the truth above all, because the truth literally doesn't care who you are. If your cat has the right answer and you have the wrong answer, your cat's right and you're wrong. Yeah. Right? It's just what it is, and it doesn't care who you are. So if we put truth ahead of all other things, and we of course put up, I think that legal barriers to discrimination are obviously very important in order to keep people from indulging on bad motivations of those types. As long as we kind of create some safeguards and securities, I think that fairness follows from putting truth first.
Yeah,
the problem
I
is
agree.
that people put themselves or their own ideologies or their own ideas. They see their ideas or their pet projects as their babies that have to be given special treatment.
The problem with truth, though, is that not defining it. It's how do you get to there? What are the proper methods of approaching the truth? And I think that comes down to epistemology, because everybody who believes in whatever these studies are teaching believes that is the truth. But there's something wrong in their approach to truth. So rather than defining truth, what are the proper modes of gaining that?
Yeah, the methods. Yeah, I'm going to revise my answer and say, fairness is extremely important for institutions, but truth should be the North Star, and fairness will come out if truth is the North Star. And I think that's why it's so important to, you want to know we know how to keep the shebang going, and we know how to, I hope we don't say at any one point, geez, Western liberalism and democracy, it was fun while it lasted, right? And so the question is,
well, unless there's something better.
Well, it's not Chaz. Right?
I would agree with you. Yeah, it's not jazz. It's not evergreen in the spring of 2017.
We named when I was on Tim Pool last week. They've set up an autonomous zone, that's not on Capitol Hill around the George Floyd Memorial. So the question is that GFAS is what I wanted to call it. GFAS, George Floyd Autonomous Zone. GFAS. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that how it works? But no, I mean,
there's been murder.
This is the thing with epistemology and truth is, while it may be very difficult to know what the ideal epistemology looks like, it's kind of easy sometimes to identify some bad ones.
Yeah.
Starting with your conclusion and then making sure that conclusion you argue toward it is probably a bad one. Trying to shove that giant white supremacy mattress into the little tiny, Toyota Tercel media narrative is probably, or, event or whatever. Yeah. This is what we did with our grievance studies papers. In probably 17 out of the 20, we started with our conclusion and then argued to it.
Yeah. And you guys are very adept at arguers or argumentors.
That's so well. I'm an excellent sophist. It turns out I would be awesome at sophistry if I just leaned into it. You give me any conclusion you want, you give me any starting place you want, and I can get you a paper that'll bridge those 2 points. Ask Peter. That's what I did. It was like just pick two random
polishing
points.
The pussy.
I would draw a line between them, a meandering line, so you couldn't follow it very well. And that's their art form. So we know that that's not a very good one.
Yeah.
We know that lived experience can't be a very good one. How?
Well, it doesn't scale, but lived experience is very good at gauging if you're on the right path in a personal sense. If the ideas that you are internalizing,
I'm not sure
I think
about that.
okay. Let me just say this, and then
true.
you guys shoot me down. The ideas that you internalize will show in your behavior, and you will be able to gauge if you're on the right path, if you're honest with yourself and you check in with how you're behaving and how you're feeling. I think that you can't get too far away from the individual, and the individual's built out of lived experience. Now, it doesn't scale directly into being able to like command what reality is, but for a personal, your North Star, and then pooling that together, I don't think you can get away from that human aspect of.
No. I take your point. I think that as they call it in the buzzwords, a reflexive and intentional way of living, as Socrates put it. Is it Socrates that said, the examined life or unexamined life is not worth living? Pete, you're the Socrates guy. Anyway, that is correct, right? And lived experience works as a barometer, but it can't possibly be a good mechanism of truth, because you can think of 50 examples without having to try where your lived experience was wrong, probably in the last week. Yeah. And you can think of examples very quickly where if, a medical circumstance came up where, for example, that it would be fatal to have it wrong. I give the example frequently of having a panic attack, being convinced it's a heart attack, and then demanding that the doctors believe your lived experience and hit you with a defibrillator. You're dead. You just killed yourself. It's a very simple example that your lived experience is not the best arbiter of what's really going on, and that EKG, whether you like it or not, knows more about your heart than your lived experience does. Because you're literally out of your mind. If you're on narcotics like Pete's lived experience is that life is way better than it really is right now.
Pete, are you willing to just show your face just once, just to show the audience your?
No, I'm laying
cozy
in
Boghossian.
bed. My leg is up. No, and I'm too high as a kite, so I'm high as a kite. So I'm gonna.
Aren't you wearing tie-dye too? Did I see that correctly?
Oh, tie-dye? Oh yeah, I think it's my daughter's shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're wearing tie-dye and you're high as a kite laying in bed. The plot thickens, Peter.
In all the medication I'm on, and my freaking leg is still killing me.
Yeah, sorry about that, man.
Yeah. So it prevented me from sleeping last night.
It's just lived experience, though, Pete. It's not true.
It's my lived experience, right?
So, that's another example, your lived experience, right? When one of our fake papers we claimed was a schizoethnography. And we claimed that the best way to understand circumstances and to derive sociological truths would be to use one's own lived experience and interpretation as a schizoid personality disorder. So it's like filter the world through schizoid personality disorder to try to come to conclusions about what's happening in the world. That's a terrible way. That's a terrible way to get to truth.
Hold on. I don't know if you've heard, if you've been asked this question before, but in engaging in this exercise, this creative writing exercise, what knowledge did you derive in a positive way from this? What's gained from playing these games out? Is it zero? There's nothing to be gained, or is there did you guys get something out of doing all this work?
Okay.
Besides
so I got a painting
proving
behind me, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So as opposed to having a weapon in my hand, like usual when I come talk to you, Benjamin, today I have a painting behind me that my wife painted, and she's pretty good. It's an abstract. It's very simple, very nice. And so, there's techniques, right, that you can learn to create, whether it's not abstract or whether it's actually abstract art. And so she has all these techniques that I can't do them. If I did, it would look like finger paints, because that's what it would end up being. I would just have like a face print and a hand print on the canvas in different colors, or maybe the same color, because whatever. It wouldn't work. It would look bad. And so, the face print would be accidental, where I fell or something onto the canvas. So it would be really terrible if I tried to paint. But there are techniques, right? So imagine the linguistic equivalent of abstract art. I learned a lot about that. Yeah. I learned a lot about doing sophistry and stringing ideas together and playing with words and finding ways to phrase things where I'm making fun of the person who's reading it, but they won't figure it out until it's too late. I don't know if those are I don't think I learned almost anything valuable about the world.
Okay.
By doing this, though, because
did you learn anything about the human rationalization, or the capacity of human beings to make sense out of anything?
Here's something I learned: the capacity for people who believe themselves to be doing rigorous work to fall for their own beliefs to fall into confirmation or desirability bias. So here's an example, a very concrete example. Peter will remember we wrote a paper about Hooters restaurants, and we sent restaurants, as they're called, and we sent this off to the journal Sex Roles eventually, and they ended up accepting this at Sex Roles, and then the editor actually went through personally, which normally doesn't happen, and made comments on the Word document. I still have this. And one of the comments that she made was, "I've never been to one of these places, but they're even more horrible than I thought they would be. They confirms every stereotype I have about them." And it's like, learned something there, didn't we? Confirm their stereotypes. Another thing was when we would get the reviewer feedback, and Peter was very happy with how I did this, and he can probably say some stuff about it. I would just give them whatever they wanted, right? They were like, do XYZ, and I would give them XYZ, but I would give them the XYZ in all caps. Like I would amplify it and give it back to them, whatever they asked for. And because I just gave them whatever they asked for in amplified form, they were like, wow, this is great, And so this is an important contribution to knowledge. And so I learned something about that too. There's a degree of like giving people what they want and flattering them.
Yeah.
And when people are already on the hook, that works. So
you became a better, defter manipulator, which is good because now you can identify the manipulation. So you can see the stuff working out in real time when you come across it. Actually, it's flooding everywhere, and we can't tell what's a James Lindsay article, a Babylon Bee article, or something from an actual publication at this point.
That is, on one level, that was a goal. We didn't have that explicitly as a goal when we were doing it, but I remember after they came out, there was like a joke, is this paper yours? Is this paper yours? Is this paper yours? And we started replying, well, the point is you can't tell. And that should tell you everything. And now, though, it's like in the Lancet, in Cell, in New England Journal of Medicine. You can't tell. Did I write that? Where Pete and I scheming behind the scenes to finally get major publications in the most prestigious medical journals, because now they're going to accept some BS written about racism that doesn't even make sense. Who doubts that we could have a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine if we wanted one right now? What does that tell you? I took anatomy and physiology once. That's it. Mm-hmm. Peter's on narcotics. That's his experience with medicine.
How you doing, Peter?
Yeah, I remember we went to Germany. This will tell you about the fields and the people who work in those fields. I don't know. They gave us some award for was it Heroes in Science or something?
Heroes of Science. That's right.
Yeah, and
does that come with a song? Sounds like it should be.
Well, they're German, so there's no song.
Yeah, but we had a great time. But one of the things people said to us repeatedly was, boy, I wish you would do this to us. Please do this to us. Please. Huh. Right, Jim? Right?
They said that the neuroscientists were like, try pull this on us. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, let's see if you can get this by us. But it's also predicated upon the legitimacy comes because it's predicated on something that's real. It's not fabricated. It hasn't been idea laundered.
Yeah, that's Helen's argument about this too. She says, and we actually, Peter, Helen, and I have an academic paper that's a real one, for real, that's coming out about this soon.
Oh,
I think they've accepted it anyway. And
I'm still skeptical, but we'll see.
We'll see. They have accepted it, though. That's true. I've seen the acceptance letter. And so Helen made the argument very clearly, like if we were to do this to a math journal or a neuroscience journal or a chemistry journal, and they accepted it, we would have actually had to have done legitimate math or neuroscience or chemistry to have gotten into a legitimate one. The difference is, we got Fat Bodybuilding published, right? On no planet. And this was I bring up Fat Bodybuilding because that's the center of the academic paper that we wrote, because somebody else, tried to say that fat bodybuilding is not in and of itself absurd. And that's false. It is in and of itself absurd. Everything about fat bodybuilding, bottom to top, is absurd. The very concept that the competition about bodybuilding must include, in order not to be bigoted, a category that's not even a competition, first of all, but then that showcases fat as a political exhibition. And it's open to bodies of what was it that we said is open to bodies of all sizes or something like that?
Faction.
Yeah, you can wear. That's on my encyclopedia. I haven't written it yet. Every time I see it, I think I've got to write that one. Faction. So it's like fashion, but with a T added.
Faction.
So it's like fat people clothes. Faction.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, this fat bodybuilding is absurd. It's absurd by definition. And so whether our argument was totally absurd or not, I think in places it was, and in places there were grains where it made more sense because that's how it worked. But the concept is totally absurd. I'm not going to get a totally absurd concept in a neuroscience or a chemistry journal. Now, their argument back is, well, when relativity came along, everybody in physics thought that was absurd. Yeah, well, we kind of got our asses kicked by that a few times in history, and people aren't quite as, I mean, string theory still going. It's completely absurd.
Right.
There's no evidence for it whatsoever, but we were absolutely willing to entertain that for 30 years. Just in case somebody ever. I know. I used to know a guy who claimed he was an experimental string theorist, and I was like, that doesn't exist. And he was like, well, here's the deal. We're doing the experiment, and we have to get the precision of the instrument out to, like, I forgot, 14 decimal places or some ridiculous thing. And it's only out to like 11 now, the measurements. Like, we have to get that much more refined. And if the number in that decimal place is this versus that, then it confirms that string theory is the better explanation versus, the standard model or whatever else. So they actually, though, had a falsifiable criteria. What on earth could falsify fat bodybuilding? I mean, it's just fat bodybuilding. It's preposterous. It's hilarious that we had to write an academic paper arguing, like, we literally had to include an argument that fat bodybuilding is on its face absurd in an academic paper, because academics are so far out, and this was actually, turns out it is a neuroscientist who we were responding to. They're so far out in like la la land that they're like, no, fat bodybuilding might be perfectly normal. Why wouldn't it be? So I don't know what to tell you. If we got a paper into another field, and this is actually the point that Helen was very good at extracting. If we got a paper in another field, it would be because we succeeded at getting a paper in that field, right? So if we got a paper in this field, fat studies, for example, or gender studies, it's because we got a paper in that field, right? Yeah. We weren't actually hoaxing these people. Therefore, what we can say is that the field itself traffics in absurdities and uses methods that we know to be sophistry. We made up the idea of fat bodybuilding first and worked our way backwards to write the paper. I still remember having that conversation with Peter on the phone, where we came up with the idea of fat body. I remember where I was out in my garden, like talking to him on the phone. I think Mike was involved in that conversation too, Nana, and we were talking and just cracking up about the idea of fat bodybuilding. Like, it's way too stupid. It'll never work. And then we found out about body blueprinting, and we're like, uh-oh, found the way. Here's the path.
So what you guys did was really, really fun. Are there other things that people can do, normies can do, in the escalation of fighting against the complete capture of every level of our institutions by an illiberal, critical theory-based project?
Yeah, open their mouths.
Okay.
Open their mouths. Show up. It's hard because everybody's afraid that their neighbors are going to cancel them. I even saw somebody in the chat earlier saying, that they're looking for parents. And so whoever you are, feel acknowledged. They're looking for parents that they can kind of go to war with, and they're scared to ask. I talk to people, parents, all the time, and they're like, well, I'm scared to ask my friends or my kid's friend's parent, dad or whatever. I want to ask him. I think he's not on board, but I'm scared because what if he is, and then he's going to cancel me? It's like, at some point it's going to be do or die, and you've just got to start talking. And take the risk. And then just what you have to do is have the courage to realize that, like, no, you're actually not wrong. You're not the one who's crazy. And that courage will beget more courage. And so what you have to do is just start speaking up. You have to not let the lie come through you, and you have to open your mouth about it and take that risk. And normies can actually do that. Like my mom's like the least political person ever, and I get every other day or something, she sends me some new Fauci meme. She hates Fauci, and it's like, so my mom is on like, my mom's like on the down low trafficking in like anti-Fauci memes now because she thinks it's like the guy, like, she's sending me like pictures of him wearing like a Oscar Mayer baloney over his mouth instead of a mask, and it's like she's had enough.
Peter, where do you see good things happening? What gives you hope that you see a change or the possibility of a pivot away from where we
Can
are
I
headed.
Can I have another question, please?
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
What's the name of
No,
the
I was
drug?
kidding.
And
No,
do you have any
I was
extra?
kidding. No, I was kidding. So I think people are, to use a pun, I don't know if James used this as a pun for it, waking up to how dangerous and illiberal this is. So many people have come out and recognized, boy, I mean, I don't even know, like, parallels to religion. I think that there are institutions, and full disclosure, I'm a member of the advisory board for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. Jim has New Discourses, which is singularly, without question, the best resource on the internet, period,
Great stuff.
for
Great
understanding
stuff.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the book, Cynical Theories. So I think that people are waking up. I think that people are, it's certainly true that they're scared. I would even go beyond scared and say some people have magnified that, and they're terrorized about, losing their job or their friends. But I think that the bright light at the end of the day is that when we get over this, I don't know when that's going to be, and I don't know how much damage that's going to do to our institutions. I think that there are some profound lessons to be learned and opportunities to re-embrace Enlightenment values and liberalism. I genuinely believe that. The only question is how much damage will be done between now and then. I do think that our universities will be a shell of their former selves. You already see that already. I do think that Portland is a horrible example. I think people are going to be more conscious and aware of how important local governance is. I think that you're going to see more people from all walks of life. I hope I'm right. I think I am, but I don't know. This is testable hypothesis. Feel that they can run for office at even lower levels. City councils have to be mayor. I think you're going to start to see this because they had enough. And to be blunt, they saw Trump do it and they saw others do it. And they think, wow, if Ted Wheeler, I really don't want to get started on Ted Wheeler or Mike Schmidt. The other thing that I see is it's a running joke on Twitter between James and myself. And I also put Matt Thornton in on those tweets that the crime rate is rocketing up. The murder rate is skyrocketing, and the people in prestigious journals, it is truly mind-blowing to me. They will name every single possible cause except the actual cause. And they will go through and they will say, they'll blame it on summer, they'll blame it on, and as I wrote, and I tagged Jim in it, the first step to solving any problem is to be honest about it. We're not being honest about we're certainly not being honest about our murder rate. I think that this, at the end of the day, this will tilt us a little more on the side of honesty. That's my prediction.
I think beauty's going to have a comeback too. I think that people are going to get sick of being preached to through their art. And
that's what I'm calling for. I've been calling for it for a while. I'm not very good at calling for it because I'm too analytical, but a new art renaissance, I every now and then see it's like you can picture the wall, right? The woke wall, concrete wall or whatever. And then there's a crack and some sunlight comes through and you're like, oh man, it's coming. Yeah. Oh man, it's coming. And it's going to be beautiful once people realize that they can just start because right now what I hear from artists, and it's so kind of sad, but it's like we got complacent. They're like, there are no institutional mechanisms by which I can put my art out. And it's like, you're an artist. Just do it.
Yeah.
Do you think Banksy was looking for an institutional mechanism?
Right.
Just do it. And then once people realize they actually do have that power, that there are other channels, there are other means to bring, and when we do see the art renaissance. So I have a friend who's an artist. I consider him rather inspiring, to be honest. His name is Dorian Vallejo. He's actually a very good artist, a really good artist. And you can look up his work. He has this compelling painting. And if I knew how to load it up and show you on my screen, I would, but I don't know how to do it. And so I'm absolutely moved by this thing, though. He's absolutely rooted in classical beauty, but incorporated stuff from kind of like the modernist and postmodernist movements in a way that resonates with a present day audience. So he has this one painting of this woman, and of course it's all Greek classical arete, like beauty, like all the proportions are perfect. It's a perfected form. I think it's of his girlfriend, so she's perfect anyway, obviously, but we're not going to put her, no, she's wonderful too. I met her. And but it's got like 4 of her like overlaid over them each other. And so it's like the passage of time, and it's just like her doing normal stuff in the kitchen. She has this other one where it's, again, the same woman, and there's like just perfect rectangles cut out and stuck somewhere else on the canvas. And so there's that postmodern flavor that resonates with the kind of like disjointed experience of reality that we kind of all have now through media and technology and the digital world. But classical beauty's behind it. And what we're going to see is that bursting forth of classical beauty and the Greek excellence, the ideal of arete. And that's going to be a big deal.
Meritocracy, arete, verite. That should be our 3-pronged attack.
I mean, that's true, right? Meritocracy. You have to put some rhyming stank on there, but you're an artist, so you can get away with it. Verite. Yeah, it's like Harvard Veritas cancels me.
Truth, beauty, and competence.
I mean, truth, beauty, and competence are really the 3 pillars that we really should be building a future society on. So, Benjamin, my man, you have hit it right there.
Well, hey,
bingo.
I don't hit it. Well, okay, yeah. Oh, you mean I hit that? I thought you were talking about.
So it's like if you had a bow and arrow. Let me make this real easy for you, and you pulled it back and you let it. Ding,
I was in a Cardi B kind of frame of mind.
No. We don't do that. We
don't.
I'm a top.
We do that off camera.
I don't. Listen, I am a top expert on sexiness, and you can tell that because it's my handle on Twitter, which means it's got to be true. Yeah. And I mean, I might have put it myself, but at any rate, I'm authenticated as a top expert in sexiness. And so the sexuality in that Cardi B performance was there. But let me tell you right now, there's another S word for that, which is sloppy. Sloppy is not sexy. That is not the Greek ideal of beauty coming through in a sensual form. That's horrific.
I watched it today. I'm like, really? You had to do that because you couldn't do anything else.
You know what got me? Because there's a lot of because you can't do anything else. That's what the problem is. So I watched I don't know, I ended up seeing like a 30-second clip of it at one point, and they were like trying to do some cool move, like they were gonna like scissor each other or some nasty stuff. And like, no kidding, it's like they're like kind of clumsy, like trying to move, and it's just that half a. Well, it's not even a half. It's like a 1/10 of a beat off time because they were like too clumsy to move smooth, and it was just like maybe like their ass was weighing them down or something, and it was just like, oof, looks real bad, and that's outside of just like how horrific the whole motif was. There was nothing there that captured art. And I'm all about it. Like if like I remember conservatives collecting some massive pearls over all these different sexy performances. People come out and they do these and it's like, hell no, shut up. That was sexy. Sexy's okay by me. I understand with your conservative morals that's the thing you don't want in society and I don't have time for sloppy messes at that level. It's what was it, the Grammys or some stupid award that people care about?
Who cares about that?
Well, that's what
everybody's eyes are on it, so we should care because everybody's eyes are on it.
It's like, that's the best you can do. I mean, come on. It's sloppy. I just don't have any patience for sloppiness. If you want to be sloppy in your private time, by all means.
I'm wearing public sexy, t-shirt. Private sloppy. That's your conservatism. Just keep it out of the public sphere. If you want to be sloppy, do that in your bedroom.
Like, don't go flop around, man. It's awful.
I am going to jet in a few minutes to go to sleep. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, Peter, I want...
Be the second time I passed out.
I want your opinion about the WAP performance, Peter.
Honestly, even thinking about that is just... I'm going to sound like some kind of conservative. I just doesn't do it for me one iota. I agree
sloppy?
That it's sloppy, it's unsexy, and it was just like, ugh.
Okay, Peter, this is my last question. What does do it for you and not sexy, but just with beauty? Like, see that just opens your heart and causes you to transcend your rational mind?
That's a really good question. I would have to say...
And it can be a lived experience. I would prefer it to be like something that you've actually experienced and that you have a relationship with that changed you.
One of the most incredible times of my life was in terms of beauty, was when I was on tour in Australia, and I got to see the sun rise and set over the Indian Ocean, and it was utterly remarkable.
Remarkable in like showing you your insignificance, or just the pure experience of it.
I think there are often moments we don't have a beauty vocabulary, so it's ineffable. So I can't. Yeah. The words I use, they're so subjective, they don't hook onto anything. But when one experiences beauty, it's often the time in one's life. Like maybe 20 years ago, I wasn't ready for that, or I didn't appreciate it. But to me, there is no really abstract beauty unless I share it with somebody. And so, like, I like to share life experiences with people, and to me, it's always followed by like the push against the solitary. And so I often find that if I'm with my kids, for example, and I don't think that this actually answers the question to the way that you want it answered, but to me it is. Like when I watch my daughter, who's super into softball, hit the ball, there's just something so absolutely lovely about that. It's like the culmination of so much work and effort, and it brings her so much joy. So I think my beauty for me is almost always entwined in a nexus of interpersonal relations as we experience things together.
That was better than what I wanted. Yeah.
That was a bit heavy, Pete.
No, shut up, James.
All right. Well, it was good talking to you guys.
Thank you so much, Peter.
I am. It's my pleasure. My addiction, new addiction now is Clubhouse, and I have to stop that because holy shit, that is like every time I'm on Clubhouse, I'm not writing my next book. But yeah, I have I have a thing with Shermer in Mind Brain Interfaces Friday. I have a thing with Greg Ellis on Sunday, diagnosing some of the problems, like how do we triage problems.
On Clubhouse.
So
and so follow Peter on Clubhouse if you can. What other thing can we plug for you, Peter?
Oh, I don't need to follow me on Clubhouse. I don't really care about that shit anymore. Follow me on Twitter if you want. I really don't give a shit anymore. I guess I've had a complete shift in terms of what's important, and I think really what's important is you have to have some kind of, as Jim says, the North Star to the truth. But you have to be willing, within the context of that, to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. And so, I guess what's next for me, I'm doing stuff for Fair. I'm doing a movie with Rob Schneider. I'm doing this children's book, which really means a lot to me. It teaches.
Is it anti-racist baby book?
It harkens back to ancient values. It harkens back to Socratic values.
Okay.
And it really teaches people, and it's turning out to be much more difficult than I thought it would be, because you can't just, like in a nonfiction, you just tell somebody. It has to be wrapped in narrative and can't be too conspicuous. Yeah. But again, I think it's a way to change the moral mind, right? Because I think that's what we need now. We need to push to the fore certain concepts that benefit everybody's aggregate happiness and goodness in the world.
And I think what you were saying about beauty really gives us a clue about where to take that individualism and the values that we find in achieving beauty, meritocracy, and competency. It's always entwined in a personal relationship.
That's correct. And Jim and I have spoken about this. You don't just teach self-esteem. You get self-esteem as a consequence of hard work or doing something. Mm-hmm. And we need to start thinking about what are those, because I do believe on the shining city on a hill. I actually do believe that. And I do believe that chapter 7 and 8, the last two chapters of Cynical Theory, when they talk about liberalism and Enlightenment values, I do believe that those are rationally derivable. I believe that they're timeless, and I believe that they are true. And the question is, how do we nudge society toward adopting values that are less divisive and more unifying? So, all right, guys, appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.
Right on, man. See you guys.
Bye, Pete. It would have been funny if he fell asleep.
I think he said he did. I saw you scrolling through the chat. Are there any questions you want to wrap up with? Did you see anything?
I mean, I'll answer whatever. I was actually taking that artist and I put a link to his paintings into the chat, which is now gone far away.
The screen. Was there a link? It might
Yeah,
have been
I could
filtered
actually
out.
tell you which one it is.
Yeah, why don't you? Let's
probably put it again.
Put it in.
Here, I'll just put it again.
Twitter. Put it in Twitter.
You gotta be ready. Ready? Here it goes. There, it's in the chat right now. Put it in the chat. I can put it in your Twitter too. You won't miss it.
Yeah,
there.
put it in my Twitter because I think YouTube doesn't like links.
Doing it. Okay. So there it is, and you can't link directly to a specific painting. So you have to go to the painting page, and I will get you to the right one. They're all great. He's very talented.
Oh, you sent a link. Okay, so Angela Jolie. Okay, which painting? Oh, you want me to just show the whole paintings? Okay, it's the.
I mean, you can show whatever.
The one
want.
through
They're
time.
All good. The one through time is in the third row in the second column.
Is it white?
Red dress
white
kitchen.
Oh, red dress kitchen. Oh wait, there's a lot of really good art here.
He's really good. He's really, really good.
I'm just going to show this one. This is really good. This is the kind of stuff that I live for.
I don't know what we're looking at. His art, though, I looked at that and I was like, this is the answer. When I was sitting in his living room looking at his art, and I'm like, this is the answer.
This is the answer. Did you mutter that, and then your wife looks over and says, is it, though?
No. I showed her the painting. I was very excited about it.
How do I do this? I have to do some stupid thing. I'm going to show it to the thing.
Make it work, Benjamin.
Sure. I got it. This is called composition of. Oh, well, I don't have the title of it. James, what's the name of the guy? And can you put just his name in the chat? And I'll say it out loud.
Dorian Vallejo.
Dorian Vallejo. And you met him where?
At his house.
Oh.
I went to his house.
You're just going to people's houses all the time, aren't you?
I just show up. It's not that one.
Is this like a Southern thing? You just kind of show up?
No, I was invited to do a talk at a university, and because the university is closed for COVID, we actually did a video thing in his living room instead. And
any
not that one either, but this is his art.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is his art.
Does that look like a red dress? Are you colorblind?
Oh, okay.
If you are, that's okay.
There's a lot of stimulation, James, and actually I don't have performance anxiety because we had 2 hours of lovely Boghossian co's. And Lindsay, what do you do? What do you do, Lindsay?
What do I do?
Yeah, what do you do? What's the art? What's your art? Do you have like a applied sophistry or like a trophy or something?
I like to screw around with words, obviously, but I mean, my art is like it's through the martial arts, right? It's like I train that, I think about that, I develop.
Okay, well, so what's the basic value of that, or what's the guiding principle of the martial art?
It is a Taoist martial art. So that is the painting, by the way. You finally found the right one. So that is the one. And I was like, okay, this is it. If you don't like it, then you're a bad person. That's my statement about your subjective opinions. Okay, so the art is a Taoist art, and so causes me, this is cultural appropriation, right? Because Chinese, but my Chinese American friends often remark, "Wow, you're more Chinese than I am," and so I'm a non-practicing Chinese American. In that regard, the principle of the art is change. It could be said to be the art of change. One of the things that we compare it to is art everybody's heard of, which is Tai Chi Chuan, or Tai Chi is what we usually pronounce it as in English. And then there's another art very few people have heard of called Xing Yi Chuan. And that we say is that Tai Chi is soft and Xing Yi is hard. And ours, which is Baghuazhang, is change. It's neither soft nor hard. It's changing between soft and hard. And so That's its main principle. Our main
So wait, soft is like
value,
yielding and hard is asserting.
Yeah,
Is that kind of
that's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. And so our main like virtue is go according to the situation.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. That's like basically the next step for me is that, okay, here's the interpersonal level, here's the institutional level. Know your battle and know how to switch. You have
That's
to
right.
know how to switch.
That's exactly right. You have to. I mean, we have other principles too, like is never apply force on force. This is a very sensible way to go.
That goes against what we were saying earlier about, when they're using strength, we have to use strength.
Well, if you go directly at it, that's not going to work. But here's the thing is one thing that you learn if you actually study a martial art that has any depth to it is that if somebody's applying force in one direction, they have no force in any orthogonal direction. So if you're pushing straight at me, I can push your arm, like no matter how strong you are, I can push your arm to the side with no effort. I can push your arm up or down with no effort if you're coming straight at me. If you're trying to lift me up, I can knock you sideways with no effort.
Yeah.
Be in orthogonal direction, there's no strength there at all. So you don't. So in a sense, actually, what this martial art that I practice is designed to do, in addition to go according to the situation, is to always flank the opponent's line of force. It's always to create a situation where you have a 90-degree angle on their line of force so that you have the ability to maximize your force. Yeah. So yielding would be to go with their force or follow their force, as we might say, or to be soft to their force so that you put them in a position where now you can be orthogonal to their line of force. Yeah. And then application of force, if we're going to hit, man, we're going to hit hard and we're going to hit you from that blind angle. Okay. Is sort of the idea.
What's the big blind spot of what we've been talking about? What do they not see? What are they
what
blinding
does who
them?
not see?
The people who are saying that criticism is harassment, the people who are taking over the institutions, the people who are saying that everything is white supremacy and we need to dismantle it.
Well, I don't think what they understand is that their stuff is comprehensible to people outside of their cult. Like they've convinced themselves that if you've engaged with it, you agree with it, right? So they've completely convinced themselves that the only way to understand it is to be inside of it. So that means that people such as ourselves who are gaining a decent understanding of it and who are outside of it are right in their blind spot. They don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. A great example of this, it won't stick. It won't really go anywhere. But a great example of this, and I'm sorry if you in the listening audience are in the crowd, but that super straight, super gay thing is just, that hit them, right? That flanked their force and it hit them. And they didn't know what to do with it and they went berserk.
And it gathered a huge amount of people. It initiated, it activated a bunch of latent disappointment or dissent.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so they are not aware of that. They're also completely blind to the fact that they can be wrong, not just factually, but morally. So they are absolutely unprepared for a circumstance in which people outside of their cult realize that they actually own the moral high ground. Yeah. They're utterly convinced that they are on the right side of history and everybody else is a Nazi in training. Yeah. They are utterly convinced of their own righteousness. And that means they're utterly blind to the fact that they can't even comprehend the fact that there's moral authority anywhere else. So the second people start being able to figure out that they can lean into their moral authority without being the chauvinists that the ideology will accuse them of being, that you can be proud of how you actually have been raised and the country that you inhabit or your views on race and racism, you can be proud of those things without being in their cult. They have no capacity to understand that, which is a rather gigantic blind spot. Mm-hmm. And a third one is that they only really know the application. They only know subversion and the application of force, making demands and grinding on them. And so they only know that and subversion. And subversion, is one of those things that people go along with, like it works until you see it.
Could you define that, like give an example?
I mean, super straight is subversion.
Yeah, okay. But they can do that. So you said that they are into that.
That's their only two tools.
Okay.
Subversion and the application of demands.
Okay. So what's a woke subversion thing, just for an example of...
Okay, so a woke subversion thing would be, I may be making an argument about Herbert Marcuse and the essay Repressive Tolerance, and then somebody steps in and is like, well, you obviously didn't really read it because you've misunderstood this point or that point. Or if it goes to the next level, obviously you don't understand the moral implications of defending a imperialist status quo. And so they try to, those kinds of things, right? They try to subvert your ability to feel like a good person, or subvert your ability to feel like a person who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
And then once they have you on a heel, they apply force. In this martial arts thing that I'm actually talking about, these 3 martial arts, the great martial arts, the so-called internal, the arts of China, the Neijia, which are Taiji, Xingyi, and Bagua, they are Xingyi. They are the direct application of hard force. The goal with Xingyi, which most people would never know, Xingyi, by the way, means Xing means shape, and Yi means intention. So it's like shape, intention, and Chuan is fist. And so the idea is, so it's not quite shape, it's like element. The wuxing are the 5 elements, and it's based on the 5 element theory of China. And so I guess it is shape or form or whatever. Yeah. So it's intention, form, or whatever. And so their thing is, the way that it actually works in practice is that I would come at you with overwhelming force with the intention of getting you back on a heel so their balance is gone, and then knock you down with it via whatever techniques. And, you know, it has lots of techniques, of course, but it has these kind of 5 primary techniques that they use to do it, associated with each of the elements. And so it's a very direct, straight line, blunt force kind of blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is the kind of Western equivalent. Well, the Germans had a blitzkrieg, and we figured out how to deal with that too. And what was it? It was to flank it and hit it from the side. Flank it and hit it from its exposed side. And so it is possible, like with Blue Anon does it, Super Straight does it, to sidestep and come after them, to all of a sudden accuse them of white fragility where they get caught in their own trap. That tends to work. Neo-racist actually has flanked them and hit them. They have linguistic dominance around the word race and racism, but they have no defenses against neo-racism, which came out of nowhere for them. And it hits them from the side with their own weapon. So they're completely weak to it. So stuff like that is their blind spot. And it does work.
You know, I'm thinking that your art is one of war, and what you do with martial arts, you've done with sophistry. You kind of learn the techniques, and you kind of understand things as this great game, and you kind of figure out the game, and then you apply the methods to subvert. You adopt everything. You adopt the entire toolkit, learn everything that the enemy has to offer, and then pivot it around into.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately kind of the way I think about it a lot, is that I actually do think that my martial arts training doubles in terms of kind of strategic training for dealing with these things, but even though it's in a different paradigm. And it turns out that the martial art that I train, I didn't pick this, back in 2006 when I started it out of this reason, obviously, but it was actually developed largely to defeat Xingyi. Xingyi was developed by a war general in like 1100 or something like that. It's just this absolutely brutal art that kicked everybody's ass. And then along comes this thing in 1840, 1850.
So this stuff is applied not only to the body, but to the army, to the group. It scales.
It can be applied to, I mean, it's all principles, so it could be applied to anything. It can be applied to ideas. The idea of like, let the light blows fall and never the heavy ones or something like that. Let them hit you if it doesn't hurt. Screw around with it. Take their force and use it against them. These kinds of principles are applicable either in any setting, really.
I wonder if we're not, in a sense, in a feudal era of the internet where there's a bunch of wars going on with all these different tactics like clashing, and it's all rhetorical. It's just we're uploading, we're in this kind of new territory where there's billions of people writing sentences or interacting on the internet, and now we're in this stage of figuring out all these different war games.
This has actually been my hypothesis for a while, that we're actually in what we might call 5th generation war. And I posited this to another guy who knows about war games, and he was like, I think we're in nth generation war as n tends to infinity, because the internet in its nature speeds things up so quickly that each generation gets replaced very, very quickly. Most of our warfare tactics in the United States are based in 3rd and 4th generation war. So they're a little bit behind the curve.
Even rhetorically?
I mean, according to the communist analysis of the United States that came out in like the 90s, that we have, the United States has no political warfare skill whatsoever. So the rhetorical warfare skill that we have is extraordinarily low, if not completely degraded, which is not a good thing, because that's what's being used against us right now. I mean, this is what I said on Tim Pool last week too. Political warfare is the most important concept you've never heard of. It's information war, then coupled with
narrative war,
events, and it's mostly narrative war.
Yeah.
It's mostly flipping and turning the narrative. This is why the event that shall not be named becomes so interesting to me, because it becomes a test. I perceived even that day before this happened.
They're so obvious. You know exactly what they're going to do.
Well, this is the thing, is I had tweeted earlier that day that I perceived that critical race theory is going to die. It's going to fall. I'm not 100% sure of this, but the wind feels like it's blowing in that direction. Like, frankly, they screwed up with Asian Americans, with discriminating against them in schools, and then this rash of attacks that they wouldn't talk about correctly. And so then all of a sudden the event that shall not be named happens, and it was like immediately, it was like, uh-oh, here comes the narrative. The question then, I was very despairing that night. I woke up the next morning, and because I was like, oh, it's all lost now. And then I woke up the next morning and I was like, wait a minute, no, I hadn't even got out of bed yet. And I was like, this is the test. We're about to find out. Can that narrative stick? And like you just said, it's so obvious. And the thing is for so many people now, it's just so transparent. It's just so obvious it's not sticking. A number of the pillars that were allowing those media narratives to fly have been knocked out from under them. And you talk about blind spots, they haven't figured that out yet. They're still trying to load the mattress into the back of the Toyota Tercel, and it's just not going.
Yeah. You know, I really do think that an understanding of what we mean war when we're talking about war is really important to grasp, and an art of war, a rhetorical war, a battle of narratives is an absolutely
just strategy
apt.
Too.
It's an apt comparison. It has nothing to do with taking down your opponents and being an asshole on the internet. It's not that. It's this huge shift of controlling not only the realm of discourse, but how we can proceed towards action, how we can frame events, and then how we can get along with a certain amount of disparate narratives or life experiences or religions.
That would be the
whatever,
ideal, actually. Yeah, that is the objective. That's the ideal objective. We shouldn't even want to have like one predominant overarching totalizing narrative. No totalizing narratives. We have to figure out now how to live with the idea that there are going to be various narratives. And then what we have to also be able to do is figure out how to separate those from gaining totalizing power, and also figure out how to extract the useful information in those for new innovation and progress. Because what we're facing, I've said this a lot of times about the woke ideology, is that it contains, I've called it like a hypersensitive, social problem detector or something. Various ways I've worded that. They are really good at spotting where a problem is that they completely misdiagnose. They're actually kind of useful to have around as long as they don't have any power, because they find problematics that you say that don't exist, and some of them don't. There's a lot of false positives, but they also, it's like when they complain about respectability politics, what they're saying is, oh, it's not allowed. We're not allowed to come in and start yelling and carrying on. And the country club in charge isn't going to listen to us if we act the wrong way. Well, the truth is there is a country club in charge, and it has these rules of decorum that they do use to exclude unfairly other perspectives. And the woke aren't wrong that has been used to exclude minority perspectives, not just, outsiders or heterodox perspectives. It's been explicitly used to exclude minorities when they're talking about very real problems that they're very, really facing, because the country club doesn't want to hear it. So when they talk about respectability politics, for me, I see that, and I don't just think, oh, this is BS. I think this is something real that's happening that's been interpreted through a funhouse mirror. So if I can figure out how to reverse engineer the coding of whatever it is that they see a thing, and it goes through a set of filters, and because, like, I'm thinking of light polarization, where it gets polarized into a certain way, or it gets encrypted a certain way. If I can figure out how to de-encrypt it, then they're pointing at something maybe nobody would have saw. Because they're freaking hypersensitive to everything problematic. And so they spot things that are wrong, but they can't interpret them right because their theory is so pathetically poor. It's so pathetically, it's comically poor. So if I can reverse, if we can
poor
reverse
theorists.
engineer, we can learn to reverse engineer their narrative back to the actual problem they're talking about, then we have new insights on problems.
Yeah.
And that's valuable. But the problem is like, you can't take them at their word because their word is poppycock. I mean, it's just crazy. And it's because the theory tries to wedge everything into a very small number of narratives: white supremacy, cis hetero patriarchy, or whatever it is. Plus fascism, because everything's fascist except fascists. They're not fascist.
No, well, not if they're fascist in the right way. Woke capital. Fascism?
Yeah.
Or fascism?
It is fascism.
Fascism. Fascism.
It is. No, it is. It's
like
really
a belly
interesting.
roll.
Woke capital. I mean, woke capital is complicated because we have to nail down what we mean. But if you mean like the use of wokeness by corporations, there's some fascist-ish stuff going on there, and then it's like colluding with these government entities, and that's exactly what fascism is. Which is really kind of weird because people are like, how can that be? Because, its ultimate goal, it's corporatism, but then it's communism, and those can't go together. Fascism and communism are polar opposites. Well, you should probably read your history of China.
It's controlled communism. It's bureaucratism.
Well, I know.
It's like everybody gets a living UBI, everybody gets a wage, and then you all think the same way, and then you create the.
And if you don't think the same way, you get kicked out of the matrix, and you don't get your UBI, and you go to a labor camp or whatever. But no, it's a model that was perfected by Deng Xiaoping in the wake of Mao, after Mao died and was no longer in power because he was dead. Deng Xiaoping steps in, and Deng Xiaoping is the one who actually opened China's market up. And China has an aggressively, basically free-for-all, gulch, literally like capitalist economy. Yeah. But it all serves at the pleasure of the party. So it's technically it's basically like the party's given license to business people to do whatever they want. And, there are different big billionaires
and then cut them out if they
back.
cross certain lines. Yeah.
That's right. And all of a sudden, if you cross certain lines, you disappear, or you're not a billionaire anymore, or the state now owns your company and it got replaced by some party operative. And so there is a model that actually combines the elements of fascism and communism into a single model. Some people call it Dengism, but most people don't know enough about what's going on and has been going on historically in China to be able to lay that out. That is the model that the woke project is aiming toward. Is it communist? Is it fascist? Are they opposed to one another? No, it's this weird blend that figured out how to combine them. And the dream is liberation. The dream on the far end of this is liberationism. And liberationism, if you read Marcuse about it, is supposed to be
slavery. It's
socialism without the bureaucracies. Well, yeah, it is.
It's socialism without the bureaucracy? How can it function without a bureaucracy?
It's pretend. It's utopia.
Okay, yeah.
But that's what that's what they think. So how like Marx believed that industrial capitalism, stage 4 of history, would give way to socialism.
You look like a nice little anime version of James Lindsay. Maybe there's an artist out there that can draw us in our anime forums. Now you're going OnlyFans on us. Oh no! You should sell your bathwater. Actually, wow.
Anybody want some bathwater? It's spicy, depending on the day, I guess.
What's your latest controversy? There was a controversy. You did something. What was it? There's a big one.
I don't know.
You said something.
Was that when I was an anti-Semite?
No. It was since the anti-Semite one. There was a pretty big one.
Oh, was there?
Know. I don't know.
I have so many that they don't mean anything. I don't
know,
remember.
Right?
They're just stupid. It's just like stupid people being mad at me for something that doesn't make any
sense.
You're
like a fucking puppet master to outrage, man. It's like you just dance in there and you just like, here's the script. And then all the vultures come down and like tear it apart. It's so weird.
Can you remember what was my controversy? I don't remember what my controversy was.
It was something. It was pretty hot. It was a race-based thing. It was a race-based thing. I saw people.
Did I say that I was Chinese?
No, somebody was Photoshop. I saw screen caps of what you're saying, and they were going after you. Maybe if you don't care, you don't care, I guess. The
Was
anti-Semite
this the one
was
where
pretty
I
heavy.
said that
heavy
woke
on
people
you.
don't care about their children? I didn't say that, but that's what people said I said. That was the other day. I didn't say
See, that's
that.
it. You can just imply something, and they'll do all the work for you.
No, I said that woke people. I said that the woke movement doesn't care about children. Like it uses them as political props. And then like some freaking brain geniuses were like, I bet they care about their children. And it's like, what are you stupid? Of course they care about their individual. Are you what the hell is this? Like, what clown college did you go to learn to translate like that, Christoph? I know who you are. I know who started it. Like, I'll name names. Christoph, Bernie, Belvedere. I know who you freaking are. You're disingenuous assholes. I know who you are. I didn't say that, and you're disingenuous, and you owe me an apology, just like about everybody else on the internet. Like, yeah. Do you want to play? I'll play.
You're pantsing people and giving them wedgies at the same time. You got all the schoolyard tricks down.
It's up and down, vertical force. That way you can see. It's like a permathong. But no, is that the controversy? Because I've had like.
I don't know. I should have took note. It was a week ago, and I don't have a.
No, that was yesterday.
I've been trying to do other projects. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, but it happens like every day, so I don't remember.
You were at CPAC. How was that?
Oh, that was fun. Actually, it was all right.
Did you hug the golden you hugged the golden Trump doll that they had?
No, I sat at its feet, like just like leaning back against it. So that was funny because people on the internet were like, CPAC has idolatry. And it's like CPAC didn't bring that. Some guy brought it to his booth. It was like a gimmick at a booth. That doesn't mean CPAC brought it. It's not a CPAC object. It's a booth.
It's still
object.
Pretty iconic. It's pretty memeable.
It's a gimmick. It worked. I got my picture taken with it, so I saw it, right? And I went and sat at it, and then I saw these guys I kind of know, or I do know. I'm on the board, Atheists for Liberty. So I went over there into their booth, and I said kind of because there was a guy I don't know yet, and I met him, and he was wearing a MAGA hat, and I was like, I have a vision. I have a dream. And I was like, let me borrow your hat. And so I just had my picture taken with the golden statue, and I took a picture with the hat, and I put it on. I put it on for like 40 seconds, took a picture, gave it back to the guy. And then I put it on Twitter with how it started, and there's me with the golden thing, how it's going, and I'm wearing a MAGA hat. People lost their minds. And that's when Claire called me the R word.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Claire called you a retard.
You're not allowed to say that word.
Claire Lehman. Or Lyman?
I'm sure it's a total coincidence that it happened on the same day that I put on a MAGA hat to troll Twitter. I'm sure it's a total coincidence.
Yeah,
it's also very coincidence.
Is Colin
probably
still here?
A coincidence that like 2 weeks ago she was like doing podcasts about critical theory, where like specifically trying to tell people what critical theory is. And it's like, oh, okay, here it comes. I saw the video. It's like, ah, shit, she's gonna snipe me soon. It's the thing she does. I've seen it. She did to IDW 2 years ago.
I love the drama. It's great. It's
Pepperidge
great marketing.
James remembers.
It's great. Pepperidge James. Yeah, I love this weird brand of post IDW drama, and the little hanger-ons, the anti IDW people. Now they're anti woke people because now we're anti woke. So
it's like I just don't care who likes me and who doesn't. I've got stuff to say. I've got stuff to do.
Come on,
I like when people like me.
You care that I like you? Come on.
Until you call me the R word, then watch me just cut you out.
Speaking of which, you don't have any weapons. All you have is like some sort of blue vulva behind you for us to polish with our eye glands.
I don't have any weapons. Are you kidding? Look at this. Do you know what this is?
it's a John Wick.
It is called Benjamin's End. Benjamin's End. No, I don't have any weaponry in this room, though, other than my fists.
And your words. You have your language and your computer.
Yeah,
that machine kills
I have
fascists.
My most powerful weapon, my cell phone.
Like that. You should get on. You should get an iPhone. Get on this Clubhouse app. People would love.
I have an iPad. Not getting on Clubhouse. I like talking to you right now.
Yeah,
I don't want to do this every day.
No, yeah.
I don't want to be
don't do it,
live every day. And
it would be good to have you in a Q&A session vocally. Maybe at some point I'll figure out how to do call-ins, and we can have a call-in show with James Lindsay, because I would like to
I think I might just start doing that on New Discourses. Me and my guys have been talking about it. Like,
yeah, you should do that.
July. I just haven't started it yet. Like every other week or every Friday night or every Thursday night or whatever, James Lindsay Q&A. Yeah. And I like talk for 10, 15 minutes, and this is what we're doing, and then ask me whatever you want. Yeah. And it can be literally, you want to know about my martial art? Do you want to know about the sweeping palm? I'll tell you about the sweeping palm. You want to know about the carrying palm? I'll tell you about the carrying palm.
A palm or poem?
Palm.
Palm.
Palm. P-A-L-M.
Yeah, palm.
Palm. Like,
we're going to start doing accents.
Show. It's Jiang. Technically, Jiang in Chinese is palm, but we say show. We'd say like dai show, carry hand, or xiao shou, sweeping or slicing hand. It's a thing.
Mm-hmm. What we need, though, New Discourses needs to turn into like some sort of like kind of Chinese medicine, martial arts of wokeness thing, and like just describe all the. That's basically what it is. You describe all the words, but you need to describe all the techniques in which these words are operating in, right? And then
that's like a next level project. I actually, speaking of the words, by the way, I'm very happy to announce right like an hour before we started this, I finally sent another batch of words off to be published for the encyclopedia. So I've got fun ones like Latinx and mathematesh and ethno-mathematics, liberalism, liberationism, non-consensual co-platforming. I know everybody's looking forward to that one.
I love it. Wait, non-consensual like is that like saying, would you like to speak to me on my YouTube channel? Like in a
no, because that'd be consensual. What it would be is like if I came on your YouTube channel. Well, no, that's not even quite right. Imagine, so here's how it arose. The first time it got used, this entity put out a call for contributions to like an issue of a magazine or something, like a web magazine. And they were like, well, you write a few paragraphs for this project we're doing, the Happy Earth project or whatever it is. Yeah. And so group X turned out to be queer trans activists wrote some paragraphs. Then you can tell who the aggrieved party in the story will be without me even to say another thing. And then there were people who disagreed with some of the trans stuff. It wasn't about Happy Earth. It was about trans issues or trans rights or something. So they had they platformed a debate on their magazine. And so they had these trans activists and queer activists, and they claimed that they didn't know when they contributed that there would be people disagreeing. They thought that everybody was going to be agreeing. And so that they were non-consensually, because they didn't give their consent, co-platformed with people who disagree with them. And so a new term was born that day. So like if you technically, like if you wrote, let's say you were woke and you wrote for a totally woke magazine or whatever, and you put it in the article when it got published, and then they had like a new feature that month, but they didn't tell you, that was like Dissenter's Corner, and they're going to publish one dissenting opinion at the end. Yeah. And they let me. Now I have been co-platformed with you because we have the same platform together, but you didn't give your consent to be co-platformed.
Oh, wow. So it's it's a way of capturing editorial privilege then.
Yeah. I mean, you can see it in editorial, but you could see it at a conference too, right? Like, we're both invited to the same conference, and maybe you're like, well, I didn't know that he was going to be here. I wouldn't have come if he was there. Harper's Letter was a great example of some non-consensual co-platform. Wow. Well, it wasn't until all of a sudden, the problematizing began, and then people were like, like they're
I didn't know it would be a headache that I'd actually have to stand up for these values. I just wanted to put my name on this thing.
Yeah, it's like somebody, there's J.K. Rowling, somebody stab her, it's like it just went totally crazy. People literally like, I wouldn't have done it if I knew these other people, these guilt by association. But that's what it is. It's like they didn't give their consent to be platformed alongside somebody who they wouldn't want to share a platform with. I can make this up.
You could, and they'll follow it through. Brittany B has a question about last time you were on. You said,
no.
You mentioned someone, maybe Marcuse, said we might not have the biology for liberation. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, that's in the essay on liberation. I think I'm going to do a podcast series reading the essay's really long, so I don't want to read the whole thing. But yeah, he definitely talks about that. This is an essay from 1969. Let me see. I'm in the preface right here. I have it. Introduction. I mean, the section 1, it's a question. The title of the section, A Biological Foundation for Socialism. And it's like, it's all new Soviet man stuff. I don't know if you know what the new Soviet man is, but the new Soviet man was like basically man isn't suited for communism, so we have to like make a new kind of man. And so this is the same argument for liberation. To the degree to which this foundation is self-historical and the malleability of human nature reaches into the depth of man's instinctual structure, changes in morality may sink down to the biological dimension and modify organic behavior, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I mean...
This is like synchronism. Like synchronism. It's like
trying to find some of the more...
If we can get the right, correct social programming, we can actually alter evolution.
I mean, no, it's more like we have to like start... Well, yes, if we get the right social programming, we'll alter evolution, and this will create a feedback loop. So you are correct. This will create a feedback loop that gets us to the point where man has been biologically remade to be suited.
You just need an extinction event would give that the right funnel to select those traits.
Yeah, I mean, it could. That's not so good, though.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's not really great. But I'm trying to find where I don't want to hit the search. I could actually hit the search where he says biological, but that's really what it boils down to, though. And then the very end of it, he's like, a utopian conception? Is this utopian? Oh, God. Yeah, it is. It is. So he does actually talk about this, but it's the new Soviet man mentality. The Soviets had the same idea.
Yeah.
Was basically that if you just kind of like remake people, you kind of selectively breed people to be communists.
Well, and it starts with your ideas. It starts with your ideas. You're like, I'm gonna pick my idea, and then I'm gonna work my way to it, my conclusion. So you pick your conclusion of humanity, and then you work your way to it. It's not hypocrisy. It's not ends justify the means. It's that is the way that you're sculpting reality, and you have a moral obligation to follow that through.
Yeah, so it even says that the goal is a counter-revolution being anchored in the new instinctual structure. So it's
extinctual.
Like, well, he doesn't say that.
Oh, yeah, instinctual. Extinction or instinct?
Instinct.
It's just
instinctual.
Just a little tweak of that word, and we're on the right path.
Like, how do you change the instinctual structure of man, though? It's like
extinction.
Well,
of everything that doesn't fit into that.
Yeah, he says that we have to relax taboos. I really do think I have to turn to read this entire or most of this essay. The second section, which is about aesthetics, is really like it gets a little weird, and a lot of it's in French, and I don't read French, so like I don't quite know what it's about.
So James, there's a couple of questions that popped up a few times about putting pressure on woke corporations, especially with regards to reshaping China's crimes against humanity. How do we put pressure on Disney? How do we put pressure on Nike so that the Uyghurs are not, that we're not bloodied by that?
I wish I knew. The thing is their market is huge, right? Their market is gigantic, and that's what's being pulled upon. You don't really have these kind of corporations in this situation looking to what is the best thing to do in the world. And the Chinese market is gigantic. And so how do we put pressure where we're now, like a lot of Americans aren't realizing with these corporations where it's connected to China, we are a minority market. The American market for the NBA is the minority market. The majority market is China. What do you do about that? I don't know. It's the NBA games play on TV in China too. It's like, you should really, somebody in the chat mentions that China has a lot of money in those corporations. That's the other thing is the investments go both ways. I actually don't know what you do to change that dynamic. I mean, that's almost like macroeconomic at that point. It's huge. And the amount of money that's involved. And people think, oh, well, we'll boycott Disney. The Chinese won't. And that might be 60% of their market at this point.
Well, I'm sure that they've insured themselves to calculate any sort of boycott. Like if we fire Gina Carano, it's like a news cycle, and then she'll be forgotten in a year. We can take that hit because people are bought into Star Wars, and we have a 10-year plan to produce content, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean they do have the ability to weather those storms as well. There are two ways that another way that you can try to do that is to try to create a competing entity. But that's very difficult because they have lots of tools at their disposal to crush competition. Parlor.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't have answers to big business questions. I have a little business.
You have a tiny little business, little baby business.
Yeah, I'm not compensating for anything.
Grow.
I hope so. Go to my website and hit the support button, and I will see you there. You can listen to my James Lindsay only subscriber only podcast.
What do you offer for your only subs? I offer nothing.
I have
my books, but
content behind a paywall on my only subs podcast. You can only get by being a subscriber on one of the 11 subscriber platforms that are available. So you sign up for any of them, YouTube, members, whatever, whichever one you like. We're on YouTube, so I'll say YouTube, but Patreon, Subscribestar, Locals, whatever they all are, then you can access those. That's all I do. That's all I can keep up with. But I do produce some content behind that paywall. The paywall is pretty small. It doesn't cost that much to be a member at the lowest level if that's all you wanted.
But they're assured in forwarding your mission.
Yeah, that's right. That's making minions is the goal.
Is that what we're doing? Making minions?
No, we are not. I am.
Little pierogies or ravioli. You just kind of knead them. You put them in a little container of ideology and send them into the boiling water.
No, you don't understand. I was reading about myself on Twitter, which is 100% true, and I'm a cult leader.
Okay.
Yeah,
you are.
I'm a cult leader, so I have to live up to that.
Yeah. I haven't earned that privilege yet, but there are certain people that are convinced you are a guru, and they ramble incessantly about you. And I've listened to them. I gave them 2 hours of my time, and they made no sense whatsoever.
Who do you think are in my cult? That is my cult. I have a cult of people who ramble nonsensically about me. That is the cult that I'm producing.
Your cult is your enemies.
I've made them. It's an anti-cult. I've made them completely non-productive. All they can do is bitch about me. They do nothing productive at all. They produce no effective counter narrative. All they do is complain about me and put transparently false things about me on the internet and get made fun of. Constantly.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. You've weaponized the Hatreon. You've created a Hatreon.
I wish I could
the man who spawned 1,000 critical podcasts.
Wow. I know. For a while, I don't know how it breaks down now, but there were people who were making more money bitching about me than I was making being me, putting out content. They literally were making more money per episode on their podcasts than I could make, and half their podcasts were just complaining that I exist. And it's like,
wow,
could keep it up, but let's cook a deal up here.
Yeah, you should cook a deal. Yeah, that's what you need. I don't have the constitution to be your enemy.
Up to your guru, because I can't get out of your head.
Yeah, that's the problem. The rent free. This is the rent free problem. You're in their head, but you're not getting any of the rent. So
yeah. That's what I got to figure out to monetize next.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start a campaign of hey guys, don't drink the Kool-Aid, and maybe they'll drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. You gotta get the correct concoction of arsenic.
I mean, I don't have to mix it up; they can do it themselves. Yeah, that's my hate boner brigade.
You want to shout out to anybody, any smaller accounts or followers that you want to give a shout out to? I need to get going soon.
Yeah, I should too. Hey, Mom. No, my mom doesn't.
Yeah, tax season. I hope she's doing okay.
No, she's solid.
Yeah,
she's probably sent me some Fauci memes actually. She's really pissed.
Fauci.
No, I appreciate everybody who supports me. I don't want to single too many people out in case I end up singling people out and forgetting other
new
people.
Voices. This is the question. new voices, the up and coming
All right,
voices.
yeah, I'm
people
actually
on
going to
scene.
give an up and coming voice. I've been talking to him a little bit. I've only watched a little bit of his videos, but so far I'm real happy about it. This guy Jason, Native Liberty, you got to check this guy out.
Native Liberty. He's coming on my show. He's coming on my show in a couple weeks.
Yeah, this
or
guy's
next
good.
Weekend.
He's
really good.
He's done the reading. He's real smart.
He's got a great heart.
Really
great heart.
Oh yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
I was talking to him earlier. I'm hoping I can actually do some collaborative stuff with him. So I'm for sure excited about him.
And what's his channel called again? Native Liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't mess that up.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is in the comment.
He's there. Kool-Aid.
He's listening. He's about to find out. He's about to blow up. Like 10 more seconds and he's going to lose his mind.
Yeah. I want to get him in just like I got Coleman Hughes before Coleman Hughes got big. I missed the.
No, I have to give the shout out to all my fangirls, of course. And some of my fanboys, I guess, even though I'm super straight, so it doesn't go that way.
Put an eye on there. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh, here it comes. It's coming. I'm like watching the chat excitedly to see this happen now.
Yeah, Native Liberty. Guys, definitely watch his videos. He's in the chat. And I think Amy Ham, she showed up in the chat. She's a feminist, hardcore feminist up in Canada. She released her first video and she's got something going on. So I'm really looking forward to
check that out.
How she develops. And we'll have Aura Aitken on. I interviewed her. And you guys are getting along, and maybe we'll do a.
Yeah, I spoke with her the other day, and she's a very passionate woman who has some very interesting ideas. Very big in kind of the art thing. Yeah. Right, and like the beauty, the authenticity. Yeah. Like, what is it that she was talking about? I took notes when I talked to her. Actually, I normally don't really do that. Yeah. How to rebuild individuality. That's kind of her big thing, right? Yeah. Oh, there he is. There he is. He saw it. All right, Jason, good man. So I just had this thing that's starting to come out. It's not really like small and up and coming. I got another sweet video series coming out from the beach, Changing Tides. We called the series. We dropped the first one on climate justice yesterday. That's with my homies at the very controversial Sovereign Nations.
In the future, we need to talk about salvaging justice out of the wreckage of social justice, salvaging the actual good ideas.
That's a good conversation.
The climate and racial and disparity and poverty and income disparity and tackling those and kind of brushing aside the bullshit.
Yeah, there's a few people who have tried to write some stuff for New Discourses. A guy, his name is like Rowan or something like that. Rowan Loveland or Levin. It's not Loveland, I think. He emails me all the time, so I feel bad that it's a temporary, can't remember anybody's name thing. But he's got an article on there. He's kind of leans into the UBI thing. I don't necessarily agree with his take, but he's kind of got this universal social justice or instead of critical social justice take that, this is a project that needs to happen. It's like, how do we rescue justice from social justice and rebuild the new model? And we need to start having some minds pointing in that direction now.
I think the only way to rescue society from the decadent phase is aiming to the next pioneer phase and aiming to the next commercial phase, aiming to the next establishment phase.
Yep.
And let all this bullshit kind of blow away, because it's going to blow away. It can't sustain itself. It's totally.
This is why I'm excited to see is the spell around critical race theory specifically breaking, because if it is, it's obviously the most powerful faction. So the whole critical social justice thing, the facade is going to, if critical race theory falls, it's all going to start crumbling. Yeah. And then what are they going to do next? Well, I mean, climate justice is going to be the next big. Climate justice and health equity are the two big pushes that they're doing right now. Yeah. So I don't know what happens around those.
I do want to do a shout out to Clubhouse. I think that there's some really difficult things going on inside of it, but there are, there's tiers to it. But you see a lot of community building. You see a lot of people in the Black community, specifically. That's what I've been exposed to. Actually, starting to have heterodox conversations and actually breaking out of like, these silos and doing community.
Speaking of that, I don't know if it'll come out, and I hope it does. But I got invited on a podcast over the weekend.
Did you fall asleep?
So No, this is an interesting story. I hope it comes out, and I hope everything goes okay. So I got, I changed my name on Twitter all the time. So the super straight thing happened. So I created super anti-racist, total copycat move. I wasn't very creative, and I changed my name to James Lindsay Super Anti-Racist, right?
Yeah.
On Twitter. So she saw that this woman in Los Angeles happens to be a black woman, very woke, saw that James Lindsay super anti-racist, saw that I talked about critical race theory, invited me on her podcast to talk about critical race theory. And so we started to talk about it, and it became apparent very quickly that she thought I was going to be woke. And so a little bit surprised to the things I was saying. And she navigated the conversation like a champ. This is Nadege August is her name. She was brilliant. Navigated the conversation like a champ. Never lost her cool. We actually talked. We did 2 episodes. We talked almost 3 hours. Had great conversations. She said I was the first person who supports Trump she's ever talked to. So talking about having heterodox outside of the box conversations, and it's like we kind of this awkward moment near the end. It's like, she challenged me on some of these ideas. I think I did fine with it, but she was like, "Are you scared about any of this?" And I'm like, "No." And then she's like, I don't know if she was making a joke or she's serious. She was like, well, speaking of my followers, don't cancel James. He's a great guy or whatever. And I was just kind of like, ooh, you got that backwards. Like the risk when this comes out to you is way higher than the risk to me at all.
That was handle it like a gentleman. Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to come out or not, but I hope it does, because we had a good conversation. It obviously she didn't agree with me. It was obviously a degree of figuring out that we were confused as we went.
Yeah. The thing is, with these Clubhouse conversations, I do not know my audience. And so when I'm called on to talk, somebody knows me, and so they call me up to talk. I'm always hedging my words. It's like I'm talking about something, and I know that I know there's all these triggers, and I know somebody in a certain woke frame of mind is going to be triggered by what I'm saying. So I'm very careful about how I say it. And every once in a while, I'll get that woke person coming up, and I do it in such a way you can really see how that ideology just spins out, because I've framed it. I'm always framing it. Like I don't know how to specify what I'm doing, but you can really see that stuff in action. And I haven't really had a protracted discussion with somebody who's very woke in a non-struggle session fashion. But there's an art of war there, where I'm not playing to win. I'm playing to see what works best. And if you can really define and explain and bring me to a better understanding of all these things that we're talking about, that I see pretty negative effects to. So it's lovely to be exposed to moments where I'm outside of my comfort zone like that. But I still have to be very careful.
I thought it was an interesting experience for sure. It definitely was an interesting experience. It was a good conversation.
Well, you're an interesting experience. Speaking of lived experiences, yeah.
That is true.
I'm the YouTube sensation, but you are the sensation.
I mean, that's what I hear.
Yeah. Do you?
What do you want to hear?
I don't know. So New Discourses is in the chat. So somehow you're on your alt account talking to us. And
no, I just never change it. It's me.
Okay. So Neji August.
Nadege. Did I spell it wrong?
Is that the artist?
That's the person who.
Who just interviewed you? Yeah. See, I'm so bad with names. I forgot. So James, let's wrap this up.
The lovely young lady. I think she's young.
It doesn't matter. She was lovely.
She was lovely.
That's great. It's a great moment in your life. I hope
she even said, it's like, I really wanted to react sometimes, and I just wanted to keep it together for the conversation. So it was really cool. I'm really impressed with that.
And she had you back on to have a second discourse.
Well, technically, we had 2 minutes between them and recorded them back to back, but it was like, let's just do another one. Do you want to do another one? We're like, yeah, let's go.
James Lindsay, good to go.
Yeah, so her podcast is called What the Fockery. So you can look it up and check her out, see what she has to say. She had a completely, she did not expect the conversation with me that she had, and handled it like a champ. So I totally respect that on every level. And
see, this is what I'm talking about
really cool.
the ability to really switch. You're not on the warpath. Like there's certain aspects of your Twitter personality that come off as an R word. In the best possible way of that word, or like
sweetly R-worded,
a complete jerk, right? But you know when to switch it in the interpersonal domain.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is the arena, right? It's a thing, and then people are people like. It's the thing that's the separation between criticizing ideas so we can close on a full circle. Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked at the very beginning about where's the difference between, it's harassment to criticize somebody's ideas. That's what Pete brought up. Yeah. And so it's harassment to criticize somebody's ideas. And for me, once the idea is out in the world, there is no person, right? It's just the ideas. And that's, I think, in a liberal frame of mind, how it should be in the liberal knowledge production game. As John Roush calls it, liberal science. That's how it should be. The ideas are out in the world, are just ideas. And so for me, I've depersonalized Twitter entirely. I know there are people behind the accounts, but it's like idea arena. It's like bumper cars of ideas. And so I see ideas and I just go, right? There are people I pick on, but I don't pick on people punching down typically, and like you have to earn it, right? You have to pick and pick and pick and pick, and then I'll do something back to you if you have a much smaller account than I do. But I'll dunk on anybody. It's just their idea was stupid and, whatever.
But
and
when you're on a podcast, when you're outside of the Twitter medium.
No, that's people. We're having a conversation. It's totally different. I don't see Twitter, even when I was writing How to Have Impossible Conversations. And it was actually, it's still in there, but it was much more elaborate. But we decided we had to cut it back because we had a word count problem. And we decided it was less important than other material. I've not in a very long time considered Twitter a conversation. So
a lot of other people do, though. This is the problem. A lot of other people do take it as a conversation. So they see you acting like a total asshole where you wouldn't in a podcast, because they treat Twitter like a podcast. They treat it as people.
If it was a podcast in which 190,000 people are responding to me.
See, this is the problem of scale.
It's true, though. And we don't have to drag this out, but as your Twitter account size changes, your life experience on Twitter changes. It is a very different thing when you have a few hundred versus a few thousand, between a few tens of thousands. And when you cross 70 or 80,000, it's like, I don't even know. I have people send me DMs almost every day. Hey, I tagged you in a thing. You didn't respond. Yeah, you and a lot of other people. I mean, it's not like some arrogance or whatever. It's like I got like 100,000 notifications today, not on my phone, but if I look at my notification reel on the page on Twitter, there were like 100,000 of them today. I did not see yours. Unless if you want me to see it, you probably have to send it to me directly. I mean, I could even type in my Twitter
analytics. It's still a shame, though. There's still like a sadness that I have that people can't maintain their humanity or people stop treating other people as human when they get to this superhuman status, right? In this number game, they're like they stop treating people in a certain way, and then people stop acting in a certain way, in a comfortable tone, in a partial tone.
So it says on my Twitter analytics right now that I had 134 million tweet impressions in the last 28 days, and 112,000 mentions. That doesn't count likes or retweets or whatever, or quote tweets. I've had 112,000
mentions. So somebody
in the past 28 days.
Somebody said something.
They put my tag in, or they replied to me. 112,000 of them in 28 days. So you could do the math, how many mentions I get per day, and figure it out. 5,000 or something like that. Mentions a day. I probably didn't see yours. And that's 100. It doesn't tell you like how many likes and retweets you got and all of that, but I had 134 million tweet impressions in the past 28 days. And it says that's down by a third from the previous 28 days. So
good. Yeah. You're taking a little break.
Yeah, apparently. So
Lent, I guess.
Well, I did go to the beach for a few days and just didn't use Twitter while I was there almost at all.
You're filming on the beach though, or you're just like...
We did film, but I also just played. I got vigorously sunburned. I was striped with radiation, as Carl from Aquatine once said. I got so badly sunburned.
I don't see
the first
it. I guess it's your lighting.
No, I mean, that was like the last week of February. It's been a little while. I've healed. I peeled. I itched like I wanted to die for like 3 days. God, the tops of my feet are what really got burned, and it was really, really bad. It was really bad. But no, while I was there for like 4 days, I left my phone in the beach house and I stood with my feet in the water, and then I got attacked by a jellyfish. And I'm like, fuck the water.
You got that experience?
No, it didn't touch me. It just came real close, and I was like, oh, they came up with the surf, and it was doing this little like puffer thing, and I was like,
yeah.
Those things are in the water here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. They're in the water.
Charles Robinson in the chat asked what a tweet impression is. A tweet impression is when somebody sees or engages with or opens your tweet. Yeah. So my tweet appeared on somebody's screen, whatever it was, 132 million times in the last 28 days.
100 million times. 100 million times.
132 million times.
Well, okay, yeah, forget the 32. I'm just having a hard enough time like conceiving of 100 million. You're staggering. You have such a musky presence on the internet. You're just being wafted around.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, James Lindsay,
so
it was fun to have you and Peter on. I wish his face was appeared because people miss just how beautiful he is when he's in a recumbent position with his knee over his head. It was a very
but he had that like. It looked like he got punched in the nose. They probably strapped something on his face.
It's like a cat or something.
No, it's probably, I don't know. He had knee surgery, and then he also has a CPAP. And so one or the other has scratched up.
Are we allowed to talk about this? I don't even know what a CPAP is. That sounds very vulgar. It's like up there with like petting a pussy. Like that's something that should belong on.
It's like CPAC, but not at all in any way whatsoever, except that 3 of the letters are the same.
But the golden trump goes deep inside.
Somebody wants to know a very perverted thing in all caps, and the answer is 3.2 gallons.
3.2, is that the amount of sperm that's released across the internet in a single day or second?
When I send it, yeah.
Yes! Our conversations are never complete until a hatchet or a phallus or the functions of either of those two things are brought into the fore.
Do you want to play a game called Am I Wearing Pants?
Are you talking to the chat or me?
You. Like, I'll just stand up.
I'm going to avert my eyes because this is the chat.
Oh, so you don't want to play the game. Okay.
Well, I guess we can play the game. Okay, here we go.
The answer is the answer is yes. I am wearing pants. Anyway,
I should have finished it there, but we're not.
I am.
Say goodbye to the chat, James.
Goodbye to the chat, James.
CPAP is for draining enormous balls. See you guys.
CPAPs are for breathing in your sleep. Is what they're for.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
it's the Darth Vader sleep machine. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Do you have? Okay. We should end. One more thing, James.
No. Yeah. Okay.